Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Natalie Phillips had repeatedly told Christina about the fate that befell her parents. From these stories, the girl knew that once in a distant childhood, of which she had only vague, fragmentary memories, she lived in a normal family with mom and dad. Her father was in business, and her mom was first a teacher and then a housewife. Christina's father's business turned out to be so successful at one period that he had ill-wishers, competitors. The character of her father was unbending and uncooperative. That's why he did not agree to share his income with anyone. Competitors, not thinking long, discounted and ordered his gangsters, putting a homemade bomb in his car. This is how Christina's parents died, and she herself was barely 6 years old at the time. The girl was placed in an orphanage, and the property of the deceased parents appropriated by rival criminals. Natalie Phillips was a graduate of the orphanage and Christina's tutor. She was on shift the day the little lost girl was brought to them. "Anthony, nicknamed Dumbass. There's a new girl here to see you. Pick her up." Phillips shouted in a gruff voice and pushed the naked, shaved girl forward. They didn't treat newcomers with ceremony in the reception area. There were rules: shave, parasite treatment, and disinfection. "She's the one whose parents were blown up in the car, remember?" Dumbass tossed carelessly, completely unconcerned that the girl could hear her. "They say he had 5 apartments and 2 cottages, all described, and there's no counting the cars and stuff." She jabbed a finger at Christina and wiped her nose, red from her excessive fondness for the bottle. "They've gotten greedy, the freeloaders. Serves them right." "Come here, Christina," Natalie Phillips called to the girl, resigned to the paperwork. "Well, come along. Don't be afraid." The little girl went meekly and obediently, not looking around. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, and what was going on around her did not occupy her at all. "Are you going to eat?" Natalie asked her sympathetically. She sat the girl down at the table and placed a plate of rice porridge in front of her. "And meat babies. Eat up, sweetheart. Here's some compote too." Christina did not touch the food and still did not utter a word. So she remained silent for almost a year. She ate little, did not play with other children, and when in the fall she was assigned to the 1st grade here at the orphanage, she sat in class with the same absent look, touching nothing and reacting to nothing. Almost no one, except Natalie Phillips, gave a damn. After the first week of school, the boarding school teacher, almost 70-year-old Mary Agnesia, wrote in her beautiful handwriting in Christina Tregobova's chart, "Presumptive diagnosis, autism, psychological counseling required." What nonsense. Autism will come up with the same thing. You outraged Natalie Phillips after reading these lines. Yes, the poor child is just in shock. Just kidding. Life turned around like that overnight. "Oh, you poor thing." She hugged little Christina affectionately by the shoulders. "We must do something with you. Will you go to a psychologist? Now we'll have." Christina raised her big serious eyes to her, looked at her carefully, but, as always, said nothing. She clung tighter to the only person who paid attention to her and gave her warmth. She and Natalie Phillips had developed their own system of communication. If a girl wanted to answer in the affirmative, she squeezed her teacher's palm slightly. If she wanted to answer in the negative, she lowered her eyes. If she needed something, she would take Natalie's hand and pull her to where the object was, pointing gently with her hand. Most of the time Natalie Phillips understood the girl, but the other teachers and nannies did not. And poor Christina was often harassed. She was especially disliked by that stupid nanny from the reception, and when she had to replace the night duty, she always mercilessly persecuted the poor girl. "Why are you sitting here like a madam?" She waved a dust rag at her when Christina sat with her feet on the big chair near the window. Christina often sat there, just like that, just looking at the street, at the big birch tree that grew right in front of the window of their playroom, at the birds hopping back and forth on its lower branches, at the rain drizzling outside the window, or at the frosty patterns on the glass, in which she pressed little holes with her warm finger, doing something with no one else to do it except to talk to the glass with her finger. Anthony, Dumbass, yelled and chased the girl away. She obediently got up and went into the bedroom. She lay on her stomach on the bed, turned her head to the wall, and lay like that. She whispered something silently to herself with only her lips. But even here she was not left alone for long. Only bums lie around in broad daylight. Go, and better play with the children. Christina did not know how to play with children now. She vaguely remembered that once long ago she had been in a similar place. There had been lots of children and caretakers then too, but all kind like Natalie. She had played there, taken walks, slept on the same almost crib. And then her mom always came and took her, Christina, home, but she doesn't come anymore. Will the little girl wait for her mommy? No one told her that, and she couldn't ask. The words were no longer spoken as they used to be. And Daddy wasn't there either, and there didn't seem to be anyone else. It was just her, Christina, and her whole family was gone, and no one explained to her why or where. All she could do was look out the window and wait for her mom to come. One day, Natalie Phillips was on shift. Christine was sitting by the big window again. The teacher was sitting at a desk with her back to the window, filling out endless reports. Suddenly, Frozia shouted someone in an unfamiliar high voice behind her back. Christine around sharply and saw this picture. Christine, the quiet, silent Christine, was standing with her feet on the windowsill, staring down at the street. She was in a state of intense excitement. Frozia, she called out now and then, and beat at the glass with a trapped bird. Christina, Natalie was frightened. Come on, Lisa, get over here. No. The girl shrieked. No, there's Frozia. Who's Frozia? Natalie asked, gently putting her arms around the little girl's waist. But she remained silent and only shook her head stubbornly from side to side. Finally, the teacher managed to pull the stubborn girl down and put her on her lap. The girl burst into tears and sobbed. She kept repeating the same word. Frozia. Natalie looked out the second-story window of her group and saw a small shaggy dog running merrily between the trees along the maple alley. An elderly, well-dressed woman was pacing gracefully beside her. Is Frozia a doggy? Natalie Phillips guessed at Christine. She nodded her head in the affirmative and sobbed again. That incident had stirred up some memories of her former home and happy life. It had released some long-held-back emotions. That same night, she ran in her shirt to the small room of the caretakers, where the girls on duty slept on a sofa and silently crawled under Natalie's blanket. It was discovered only in the morning, when the teacher woke up a little before the alarm clock and felt a small and warm baby's body under her side. She lifted Christina up and took the sleeping girl back to bed. And after breakfast, she pulled Natalie by the hand as usual and led her back to the room. The couchmaid showed her hand, saying, "Sit down." Natalie sat down and put the girl on her lap, realizing she wanted to say something to her. Christine opened her mouth, looked at Natalie pitifully, and then suddenly decided. Frozia went out with someone else's aunt. I know Mom won't come again. Can you be my mom now? Natalie's heart clenched painfully. She pursed her lips to keep from crying and replied, Of course, honey. Only it will be a secret between you and me. Okay, it's not like I can take you home. I'm your kindergarten teacher here. Do you understand why you can't? The girl stiffened to understand, for Natalie Phillips did not find at once what to answer the little girl. Indeed, that because she was too old to bring up such a babe, because she had a sick old mother at home and a small salary, because she'll never be able to cope, she won't be able to give the girl, and then the girl, what she so badly needs. And to deprive her of the hope of adoption and perhaps a happy life, she has no right. Because I have a very small apartment, Natalie Phillips said at last. That's all right, said the little girl eagerly. It's nothing. I'm so small I won't take up much space. And my old mom lives with me, Natalie Phillips added, almost crying. So it won't work at all. I'm sorry, but you and I are going to live here like family. Okay, the girl nodded. What else could she do, poor girl? Time went on and on. Christine grew from a little girl who was frightened to a teenager with long, skinny legs and a habit of biting her nails. No one ever adopted her while she was a toddler. A few times people had paid attention to her, but Christina herself had never agreed to adopt father, as the kids put it. Since she had seen the doggy in the window, her ability to speak had returned, and she was very vocal. And she had the character of one who would not put her finger in her mouth, and from now on it was not for her, but for the thin fools and other offenders. Don't you dare touch me. she said sharply one day to the night nurse who wanted to take her to the bathroom to wash off her eye makeup. Girls from the age of 12 had been getting the simplest shadows, mascara, nail polish, and other things of interest by unknown means, and were desperate to assert themselves in this way. "Which princess is it?" The babysitter grinned viciously. "I'll get you now." And she reached out to grab the unruly girl by the scruff of the neck, but she turned around and bit her painfully on the back of the palm, jumped aside, and stood in a fighting stance, like a cat ready to attack. Eyes sparkling, hands with painted sharp nails set forward. "Only there's no hair, or it would have stood up." "Devil spawn," muttered the nurse. But she didn't bother anymore, went and put a band-aid on the bite and promised to complain to her superiors. "Just try it," threatened her unruly girl. "I'll have a lot to remember, too. You think I don't know where you hide your bottles?" She added mockingly. "The principal will find out, too. She'll be a fool for nothing," with rage mixed with amazement. I could not find anything to answer this insolence. She stood opposite for a while, glaring angrily at her opponent. Finally, she waved her hand, turned around, and went to her duty room. When she arrived, the first thing she did was to look under the upholstery of the sofa, where a bottle of Boromotuka was stashed in a secret hole. But the bottle was gone, and the nanny shook her head mournfully, realizing that the nasty girl was not bluffing, and snatched her stash, while she herself was flapping her mouth. They had to give up their positions and call a shaky truce, and only to Natalie Phillips. Her sensitive secret mother, Christine, was still tender and affectionate. Often they were alone together in the tiny nursery. They were on duty, talked about heart to heart until late at night, drank tea with homemade cookies, which Natalie brought her favorite, and shared their simple secrets. Yesterday, Park from the third group asked me to go out with him, Christina said quietly to Natalie Phillips. "What about you?" The teacher affectionately rubbed the girl's thick blonde hair. I asked, smirking Christina. "So that you know, next time to the basement, howling did not give a howl, because I don't know what they have in mind." Natalie Phillips just sighed. The girls at the boarding school knew everything since they were about 11 years old, if not earlier. It was the nature of the institution. She couldn't help it. She tried her best to explain a lot of things to her group in an accessible and inobtrusive way, so that at least they wouldn't try to go to any lengths to get the details they were so interested in. "There was a girl in the 6th form who got pregnant when she was 14, Natalie said. "My God, where was Olivia Peters, their teacher, looking? You can't keep track of them all, they're so clever." But Natalie was not worried about Christina. This girl stopped such attempts quickly, once in the face, and there are no more who want to get close to her. Christine often asked Natalie Phillips about her dead parents. Who were they? What did they do? The kind woman, eager to help her pupil, extracted all the necessary information from Christine's personal card. And what was not there, told herself, as far as she knew and remembered. The whole town had been discussing the high-profile murder for months. She brought old newspapers from the library, where there were articles about her father and his activities as a businessman. There were also pictures of Christina, their parents, and her smiling little girl with her mom and dad. When she entered the orphanage, she was no longer smiling. Christina stared at the newspapers for a long time, reading from cover to cover all the articles and notes. Then she withdrew into herself for a few days, became silent and thoughtful. She didn't answer any questions at all. Emotionally digesting the information she had received, she said to Natalie Phillips with grim determination, "When I grow up and finally get out of here, I'm going to find my parents' killers and avenge their deaths." Jesus. Natalie covered her mouth with her hand. "Don't think like that. You can't live in the past. You have everything ahead of you, your whole life. Don't break. But you think I can live peacefully knowing that my parents' murderers are living happily off my father's stolen money?" Christina was outraged. That was the first time she and Natalie had had a fight, so to speak. But after a couple of days, they made up and apologized to each other, and life went on as usual. In the end, Natalie thought the girl had forgotten her hot words and her vow of vengeance, but time proved her very wrong. The first thing that Christina Tregbuva did, having received her documents on reaching the age of 18, went to the cemetery, to the grave of her parents. She sat there for a long, long time, whispering something to herself. She stroked their modest photo with her hand, and after throwing her bag with her things into a 10-meter room of the hotel, which she and her classmate were allocated by the state, She went to the registry office and wrote an application for the issuance of a duplicate of the death certificate of her parents, their marriage, and their relatives. In 3 weeks, she was given everything she had requested. It turned out that on her father's side, she had a paternal aunt and a grandfather who lived unknown where. And her grandmother, her father's mother, had died long ago, when her father was still a schoolboy. No one on her mother's side. "Christina, I want to suggest this to you," Natalie Phillips said to Christina the next time they met. "I have an old acquaintance. She works at our institute in the chemical and biological department, now a professor, PhD. You've always liked biology, haven't you? Do you want me to ask her to meet you? Let her talk to you herself, see something, maybe help you somehow with enrollment." Thank you, Natalie Phillips. "That would be wonderful," Christina said gratefully. "So we have a deal then? That's good. I'll give you a call. Also, tell me how you and Katie are settling in." "A little. It seems okay," Christina grinned. "Katie's a homemaker. She kept baking pies. Can you believe it? Treating all the neighbors." Natalie laughed, a little unsure of how to say it, and suddenly determined, reached out and slipped a few commemorative bills into Christina's pocket. "This is for you to settle in." "Really, Natalie Phillips?" The girl was indignant. "That's already unnecessary. I'll make do with enough. Is your mother sick?" "Mom died a week ago." Natalie lowered her head. "And now I'm all alone. Take it, please. Don't hurt me. You're almost like family to me." She looked pleadingly at Christina, and the latter suddenly noticed how recently the features of the kind teacher's face had changed so familiar and sweet. What deep wrinkles lay along the nose, around the lips, under the eyes, and the eyes themselves. How do they look now? Pathetic, sad, even wistful. Okay, she hugged Natalie. "Thank you so much for everything." Christina was touched. "That girl is mine." "Well, you come on in." "Okay, I'll text you the address. Come in, don't be shy." The second trip to the archives of the police department was not particularly successful. First of all, Christina came at the wrong time. And secondly, the woman at the window told her that such requests take a long time and are not always reliable. It happens often that when a person changes his or her place of residence, he or she does not indicate the new address in the registration card, she said, and then the information gets into the system very slowly. "Come back on Tuesday morning. We will make inquiries, but I would not count on any result if I were you." And it's been a while. Christine was a little upset, but then she thought for a while and came to the conclusion that she should not be discouraged. No one promised her that everything would be smooth and easy. She would have to make her own way in this life. After all, she had no one else but Natalie Phillips. At the thought of this old woman, Christine felt warm and happy, as if a small hot fire had been lit. Smiling involuntarily, she shook her head and went to the Central City Library to carry out the second part of her grand plan. "Good afternoon. Give me, please, a copy of the city newspapers for July-September 1998. She asked. What? I don't have a card." "Yes, give me my passport." Having registered in the library as a reader, Christina received several weighty press copies for the period she needed and delved into her search, completely oblivious to the world around her. It's not that. It's completely irrelevant," she muttered in a low voice. Suddenly, she shrieked loudly enough to startle several readers who had come into the reading room with her that day. "Here, let's see," she said in a whisper. Dight & Co. Eugene Maxwell, a well-known businessman, the main competitor of the recently killed in an improvised explosive device explosion businessman Tregbabov David Vladimirovich. Previously, he had ties to informal gangs. He was the main suspect in the case of the murder of Tregbabov DV and his wife Tregbabov Allison. Guilt has not been proven. Criminal case suspended due to lack of evidence, Christina read. "So that's it then," she muttered. Well, hang in there now, Eugene Maxwell." And tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and for a couple more days, she would come to the library again and again to read old newspapers, paralleling social media and other electronic resources. There was internet access for readers here, and she didn't have her own computer or smartphone yet. There was an old landline phone in the communal room. Until now, to think about it, it was her only connection to the outside world. But Christina didn't have time for that. She was just beginning her independent life and was determined to recover her father's fortune and avenge her parents' deaths. After studying all the information available to her, she learned the following. After the criminal case was closed, Didinko Eugene, the alleged killer of her family, rolled up all the business and left town with his wife in New York. Escaped, then, Christina summarized. But it's okay, he won't run away from me. She searched the internet and looked around. The man was quite famous, and found out that Didinko did not sit idly by in New York either. And soon he was doing about the same thing as in his hometown. He got into the structure of local government, first as a municipal deputy, then as a nominee of one of the political movements, and now he was back in a good position, which helped him in his business. I'm sure it's all on Daddy's money, Christina lamented to herself. She faced a difficult task, to find an opportunity and get close to this very Didinko. If possible, to get into his confidence, to get to know him better, and then, as a program maximum, to rob him to the ground and prove his guilt in the death of his parents. Christina was not stupid and perfectly understood that now she, a graduate of the orphanage, almost no chance. Chances to draw the attention of law enforcement agencies to her long-standing problem, a criminal case that had been lying in the archives for no, she would be smarter and not act openly. She'd have to be more cunning and try to defeat her opponent with her own weapons. How? She didn't know that yet, but she hoped to find a way soon. And if it would take years, let it go. She was young and ready to sacrifice her time to achieve her goal. A few days later, Natalie Phillips called her and told her that she had arranged a meeting with her friend the professor. Christine wanted to answer her on the phone that she didn't need it and had other plans. But she changed her mind and said that she would come to her house and they would talk. They quietly agreed that on Friday evening the visit would take place. It was the first time Christine had been in Natalie's cramped two-room flat. She, like all the graduates of boarding schools, had never been in the real apartment of a normal person who lived at home. She had long forgotten her happy childhood, now looking around with interest. The small kitchen was crammed with furniture, so that she only had to pass sideways between the table and cabinets. It seemed to her to be a specimen of domesticity. "How nice you have it here," Christina said, cautiously seating herself on a rickety old stool and taking a sniff. The violets sitting in rows and pots on the windowsill are beautiful. "Thank you," Natalie smiled at her. "Let's have some tea. Here, take some candy. I'm the only one who feels so empty here now. Well, now to business. Ellie Gavins will be expecting you Wednesday night at her department. She's seeing someone there and she'll talk to you afterwards." Natalie Phillips, Christina began. "The thing is, I've decided to go to Peter." "What do you mean, to Peter? Why?" Natalie marveled. "It turns out I have relatives there," Christina said, embarrassed at having to lie. "My father's cousin." "Oh, that's what." Natalie took off her glasses, sweating with excitement, and wiped them with a tissue, absent-mindedly looking at Christina with a trusting, myopic gaze. "Do you think she'll take you in?" "I don't know," Christina shrugged. "Maybe, and if not, I'll try to get caught up there somehow. Maybe I'll get a job, but I have to stop somewhere, unless you're sure your aunt will take you in, at least at first." "I don't know," Christina answered again. And she herself was beginning to doubt the feasibility of her grand plan. Indeed, where would she go? From the train station. And she had not a penny of money. The tiny government allowance would hardly help her find any housing. "You know what?" Natalie said firmly. "I'm guessing you just gave in to an impulsive urge. Tell you what, go see Ella Gavins on Wednesday after all. She's a professor in the applied biology department. Remember, her last name is Gavins. You'll talk to her, she'll evaluate your knowledge, your abilities. She'll tell you how to get into St. Petersburg University. Otherwise, it will be awkward. I asked her to admit you, and you won't come?" "Yes." "All right," agreed Christina, and hugged her patroness gratefully. "Well, I'll be off." "Goodbye, daughter," Natalie said affectionately, and slammed the door behind the girl. She had never had children of her own. She had never married. Her old mother and her favorite violets were the only living things to which her long-lived heart belonged. Natalie did not say anything to Christine, but she had already decided that she would leave her apartment to her. She had even drawn up a will with a notary. The institute struck Christine with its enormity, disproportionately huge, as it seemed to her, halls and recreations, numerous passages with a large number of doors. Then she realized that in the evening there were almost no people here, and during the day there was probably no place for an apple to fall. Christine had a hard time finding the right classroom and sat down to wait for the end of the retake. Several students, waiting for their turn, were hanging around the corridor, running to the toilets to smoke or sitting, staring at their textbooks, intending at the last moment to digest the unlearned material. One of the textbooks was lying on the chairs in front of the office door. Christina picked it up and began leafing through it. She had come a little early, and it looked like she was going to be here for a long time. It turned out to be a volume on human anatomy from the university course. The girl read one paragraph, then another. She was so engrossed in reading that she almost forgot why she was here. The material was broader than in the school textbook. And soon Christine came across a chapter on the physiological features of pregnancy. Here she came across a term she had never heard before and had never even suspected that such a thing existed: surrogacy. It turned out that it is possible to bear and give birth to a child whose biological material belongs to other people. That is, the primary fertilization of the egg is done in a test tube, and then a viable embryo is inserted into the uterus of a woman who is carrying essentially someone else's child. This fact struck Christina so much that she put the textbook aside and thought deeply. Why is such a thing even necessary? She took the book again and found out that the procedure is carried out at the request of a childless woman who is unable to conceive and bear a child. Christina, who had long ago decided that she did not need children, too much responsibility, and it is not part of her life plans, began to ponder, does anyone really want to have a child so much that people agree to such complicated procedures? Well, let's say about a woman who agrees to be a surrogate mother. For what reasons? Out of her naivety. She did not know the answer to this question, could not think of anything, and decided, as always, to use the library internet the other day. The students had dispersed. Someone took the abandoned textbook, and Christina quietly slipped into the classroom and found herself face to face with an elderly, austere-looking woman who was collecting books and notebooks in a bag. "Good evening. I'm from Natalie Phillips. My name is Christine," she said. She replied tiredly, rubbing her temple. "Why are you so late?" "I was waiting for your test to be over," she said. "I should have come in. While they were writing, we could have talked to you," the woman said, a little annoyed. "That's okay. I'll come back another time." Christina turned to leave. But Ellie Gavin stopped her. Wait, how quick are you? Let's go to the cafeteria on the first floor. It's open till 9:0 for employees. At least I'll have a coffee. My head is already cast iron." After drinking coffee, the woman really revived and now looked at Christina favorably. "So you are my Natalie's favorite. So tell me." "There's not much to tell," Christine shrugged. "Natalie Phillips insisted that I come to you. I've always liked biology, that's all. I was thinking about where to go. Now I've decided to go to Pittsburgh." "Wow." Ellie raised her eyebrows. "Just like that, Pittsburgh?" "Yes," Christina nodded. "I have distant relatives there." "So, what do you like about biology? What section, what field?" the professor asked a little mockingly. Well, Christina laughed. "In fact, I didn't really have any special priorities until tonight, when I read a section in someone's textbook about the physiology of pregnant women." "Oh yeah." Ellie was surprised again. "What was it that interested you so much?" She didn't notice how she automatically called Christine you, as she always did to students. "Surrogacy," she replied with a twinkle in her eye. "It's so exciting." "I agree," Ellie nodded. "Well, I have a contact. A fellow student works in the Department of Medical Pathology at the University of Pittsburgh. He deals with just such questions and has already written many scientific papers." Christina texted him. "He might hire you as a lab tech, but you'd have to take the internal exam on a regular basis. They have their own competition besides Forbes. Did you take any other exams besides the compulsory ones?" "Just chemistry and biology." Christina smiled. 80 and 82 test scores, respectively. Did Ellie Gavins put on her glasses and looked at her interlocutor with new attention. "That's a perfect score. In that case, you're eligible for the budget?" "I don't have any other option." Christine smiled a little ironically again. "Thank you for your help. I will keep you informed and give Natalie the contacts." Ellie nodded goodbye. And so it was that Christina ended up in Pittsburgh after all. She went straight from the train station to the man Ellie had recommended her to, and he really took her in and listened to her. "Where are you staying?" He asked her at the end of a long conversation, which included a small exam of her major subjects and a tour of the laboratory where Christine was to work. "Nowhere yet," Christina said. "Did she come to you right away?" You see, the professor, whose name was Oliver Johnson, took off his glasses and put them on the table next to him without the big thick lenses. His eyes immediately became large and the fluffy long lashes and childishly naive. So it became obvious that this man, who was not old yet, was terribly intelligent and decent. "You see, Christine," he said again, obviously choosing his words carefully, "I hope you won't think me impolite and strange, but Ellie has told me a little about you. So I know about your predicament." Christine was silent, looking at him carefully and calmly, not understanding what he was getting at. Once again, Oliver Johnson repeated, trying to get to the point, "I have a cottage not far from the city. It's very convenient to get there by train. The station is very near. Not so long ago a man lived there, a good acquaintance of mine. Yes, he kept a little watch over the house, you see. I'm a very busy man and lonely. My parents died." G.I. Scene's interlocutor was sweating from the mental effort. "So, would you agree? Not for free, of course." He raised his index finger and shook it in the air, as if he were affirming his own. "Would you agree to live a little at this dacha? It's very cozy. It has all the necessary amenities. I'm sure you'll like it." He looked at her pleadingly, as if it were not Christina, who was an orphan with nowhere to go, but he himself who had asked her for this favor. The girl burst into an unnecessary and now inappropriate laughter. This adult and important man looked comical, asking her to stay at his dacha as some incredibly important favor. Christine could hardly suppress her silly impulse and left only a polite smile on her. "Oh, I would be very grateful to you for this opportunity." "Really?" rejoiced the professor. "Of course the drive is quite far. It would take about an hour to get to the laboratory, but it's very beautiful and not at all scary. Security, a barrier in the village. Everything is as it should be. Don't be afraid, please." "You're not afraid, are you?" No, Christina assured him. "Still ready." Oliver Johnson laughed. "Beautiful, beautiful." The professor put his glasses back on the bridge of his nose and turned back into an important and unapproachable big man. "Please have a good time sometime tonight. And at 8 o'clock you and I will take my car to the place, and I will show you everything. I'm very glad it's all worked out so well. You can have lunch now in the university cafeteria, and I'll make sure you get a pass. And tomorrow your pass will be ready, and you'll be free to roam the grounds. You'll be back to work the day after tomorrow or the day after that. How do I get a job? It's not urgent." Finally, Christina managed to slip out of the office where this conversation took place, and she literally folded in half from the fit of laughter that overtook her. To think that, through such a human chain of acquaintance, she had found a place for herself in the world. Christine felt a deep gratitude to Natalie Phillips as head of the staff and to the professor under whose supervision she would soon work and in whose house she would live. For the first week in her new workplace, all she did was wash lab dishes. The endless flasks, test tubes, and cups had to be disinfected in special solutions for each variety, then washed with regular detergent, dried in a heat-resistant cabinet, and finally sanitized and dried again. There was a lot of work, but Christina even liked this monotonous work. She liked the atmosphere of the laboratory, where smart people worked in a friendly team, solving important problems and moving forward science. Here they put experiments, described the process and results, filled journals and computer databases. Several large laboratory departments occupied an entire wing of the Research Institute building. In the same building was a university that trained future scientists. Christina hoped to enter the biology department there next fall. In the meantime, she diligently delved into the intricacies of the new life. The salary in the laboratory was small, but she did not need much. She didn't pay a dime for housing. Her landlord and boss, Oliver Johnson, also paid her utilities. Moreover, he transferred money to her for looking after the house, although Christine refused to take it. Then he started transferring them to her card, and it was inconvenient to return them. Christina ate little, eating cheap lunches at the university canteen. There was always free coffee or tea in the laboratory. The staff was always bringing something, and the refrigerator was bursting with supplies. Christine also started baking baked goods and giving them to everyone. At Oliver Johnson's house, she occupied the smallest guest room. She used the kitchen, downstairs bathroom, and washing machine, but cleaned everywhere once a week. She enjoyed cleaning this big empty house. She liked the smell of tidy rooms and the opportunity to be of use to her kind employer. She had to get up early, but she was used to it. The railroad station was not far away, and Christine liked the sound of trains, especially at night. She worked officially until 6:00 p.m., but sometimes stayed late in the evenings and on weekends. It was possible to walk around the legendary Pittsburgh. This city amazed Christina. It seemed that every building and stone could tell something. She loved everything here, but never for a second did she forget her main goal. In her months in the city, she'd learned the identity and activities of her enemy, Dedinson, through the press, word of mouth, and the internet. But how to get close to him, she had no idea. The opportunity presented itself unexpectedly. The laboratory where Christine worked, including the treatment of infertility. A group of scientists led by Oliver Johnson used advanced methods and enjoyed authority in scientific circles. Therefore, it was here that a couple who had been trying unsuccessfully to have a child for many years came to Christina. All their attempts had failed. Numerous pregnancies ended in miscarriages. And now, when both were already over 40, the hope of giving birth to a baby naturally and completely dried up. Important people are coming to see us today, Lucy Wasserman, the head of the department where Christina worked, told her girls in confidence. Oliver Johnson from the city hall warned them not to talk. It's like doctor-patient confidentiality, total confidentiality. I see. We won't look at the house at all, not even a glimpse. Not on purpose, the female employees assured the boss. Well, that's good, she smiled. Now let's get to work. Christina wisely remained silent. She was generally silent most of the time, but she always did her work well and on time. Therefore, quite rightly earned a reputation in the laboratory as an employee neat, diligent, and able to keep her mouth shut. In the middle of that day, about an hour after lunch, Lucy Wasserman called the girl into her office. Christina, have a seat. I've been asked to speak to you by Oliver Johnson. I'm listening, Christina replied calmly. Our laboratory is currently being assigned a new task. You will remember, of course, one of the important areas of our research related to the viability of human eggs. The girl nodded. So, Lucy continued, now we are presented with a rare opportunity to continue experimenting with the biomaterial of a particular individual. Is that possible? Christina raised an eyebrow slightly, who was quite surprised by this turn of events. Let's just say that in some cases, yes, the supervisor looked at her young employee. But everything that happens within these walls has to stay here. Do you understand me, Christina? Absolutely, the girl echoed. Good. Lucy Wasserman, satisfied with the progress of the conversation, rubbed her hands together. In that case, I'm officially informing you that you, Christina, will assign to Oliver Johnson's department as a senior lab technician from this day forward. You start tomorrow. Now go to Human Resources. You will need to sign the paperwork. Okay, Christina stood up and walked out. She wasn't particularly surprised by the new assignment, as she was well aware that she was the most suitable person for it. Single and completely dependent on the lab management. Where could one find a more ideal person for this top-secret research? However, she had no idea what lay ahead of her and what new challenges fate had in store for her. Ninsura. Bright, surprisingly bright for a Pittsburgh winter sun. New office, new position. Christina sits at her new desk and spreads out her work supplies, creating her own order. Christina, did you get this handed to you? The receptionist places a simple cardboard folder on her desk. Oliver Johnson said to familiarize yourself with it. Okay, thank you, Christina nodded, calmly opening the folder. She read the introduction about the medical procedures that would be performed as part of the scientific study and turned the page. Saw the card of the patient whose biological material was being submitted for the study. Tiffany Hillison, 46 years old, 9 pregnancies, all ended in spontaneous abortion in the first trimester, 6 in vitro fertilization attempts in a hospital setting. Clinical pregnancy was not diagnosed in any case. There were no pathologies of the patient's reproductive system. Christina closed the folder and thought. Her thoughts were racing feverishly and in complete disorder, jumping from 5th to 10th. She was in a state of extreme mental agitation and could not think of anything else but the chance that fate had presented to her. Christine had no doubt that this woman was exactly who she thought she was. In the marital status column, her husband's name and title were listed. In addition, in the next section, he himself, Eugene Maxwell, 48, was also listed as a patient participating in a research and scientific experiment. A patient providing his biological material, and she, Christine, the daughter of the parents who suffered at his hand, sitting here at this table, has access to all the classified information and will soon be directly involved in the whole process. What is this, if not a gift of fate? An opportunity to settle accounts with her enemies. But how? How exactly? It is necessary to think of something and quickly. Suddenly, the girl realized the most important. Dickinson could easily recognize her. Not by her appearance, of course, but by her surname. It is unlikely that he had already forgotten about his crime and about the man whom he had ordered to destroy together with his wife. What to do? Summarily, thought Christine, and found no better option but to change the surname. However, it was impossible to do it urgently. And then it is necessary to somehow explain to his management such a spontaneous decision. However, it is necessary to first find out everything properly. Gritting her heart, she approached Oliver Johnson at the end of the day. "Can I see you?" Christina Dmitrieva asked. "Come in, please," he smiled. "What is your question?" "I wanted to know about the stages of our upcoming work in the experiment." "Yes, I'm listening to you." He put his hands on the table and looked at her intently. "How long before we get to the direct work with the patients?" "Well, how shall I put it?" Oliver Johnson leaned back in his chair. "It will depend on the progress of the primary research. Perhaps even more likely, it will take several months." "Good," the girl nodded. "And if I understand correctly, the ultimate goal for our patients is a new cycle of IVF attempts." "In principle, yes," nodded the professor. "Only using viable eggs modified in the course of our experiments. But I admit, based on the available data, I do not consider this option acceptable." "Why not?" "Well, you see, the patient's body can hardly handle the strain of pregnancy. You've probably already looked at the chart and seen how many chronic diseases there are, haven't you?" "Yes," said Christina. "But then what is the only way out? Surrogacy." "Exactly so," smiled the professor. "I see that you're not wasting time. That's very commendable." "Thank you for the clarification." Christina stood up. "This is exactly what I needed to understand the nature of our work. One more thing, Oliver Johnson. I think I should make you aware of my impending change of name. We shall soon have the pleasure of congratulating you." Raised his eyebrows at the professor. "No," Christina smiled. She guessed that he meant marriage. "My marital status will not change. Only I want to change my surname because the current one reminds me too much of the tragedy that happened in my family." "Oh, of course, I understand." The professor frowned slightly. "I sincerely apologize. It's okay. Time heals." And Christina tilted her head slightly, saying goodbye, and left the office. She went to her room, made a strong espresso from the coffee machine, and thought again. So she should have enough time to change her last name. Now she would have to devise some plan to get close to the Dickinson family to gain their trust, so that one day, when she had succeeded in completely confusing the enemy with her network of cunning intrigue, she could look him in the eye before she destroyed him and tell him whose daughter she was. That's when she will finally avenge her parents' deaths. Eugene Dickinson, a large official, was actually miserable financially. He had everything one could wish for. Social status too, of course, but there was no real family in his life. He hadn't loved his wife for a long time, and in the last few years he had felt a real disgust for her. Endless unsuccessful attempts to have a child had turned her, once a beautiful, cheerful, desirable woman, into a real tortured, slovenly, and restless. Constantly preoccupied with how to maintain her hopelessly fading femininity, Tiffany Illison had been a gorgeous woman in her youth, a former model, and Eugene was immensely proud of his wife. When they were in society, all the men saw her with envious glances, and it flattered his ego. At first, he and she did not even think of having a child. Wanted to first achieve a position in society, firmly stand on their feet. And then it turned out that it is too late, and nothing works. We started going to doctors, taking tests, We had to endure a lot of not the most pleasant procedures. In the course of all this medical torture, Eugene inadvertently learned about his wife, Tiffany's, long-standing abortions, which she had done before she met him. He was completely angry, blaming her for everything, and now he couldn't even bear to see her anymore, haggard, downcast, desperate to make up for lost time and again, forcing him to undergo humiliating examinations and biomaterials. Of course, Eugene had as many mistresses as he wanted. He still looked pretty good himself, exercised regularly, played tennis and soccer on the city hall team, and was an inviolable object of female attention. But what he desperately wanted was not just a one-time pleasure, but a normal family to which he wanted to return after work to his own children, not adopted offspring. Tiffany repeatedly suggested and asked him almost on his knees to take a child from the orphanage and raise it as his own. "No, don't even think about it," he answered her categorically. "Never in my life I will not bring up someone else's child. Who knows what will grow out of him? Who were his parents? What is his heredity? I want my own child, period." "But what if we can't have one of our own?" Tiffany asked in desperation. "Then I'll find someone else to be the mother of my children," her husband yelled angrily. "A normal, healthy woman who hadn't had an abortion when she was young." "Oh, is that so?" Tiffany was mortally offended. "So now it's all my fault?" "Yeah, who else would it be? Certainly not me. If I were you, I'd think twice before looking for other candidates." "What do you mean?" Eugene was indignant. "Are you threatening me?" "Call it what you want. But if I find out something like that, I want you to know that I'll have a statement from you the same day, describing all your dark deeds. God, who sees everything, doesn't give you children because you're a monster. You orphaned someone else's little girl and killed her parents." "I'll get you." Eugene swung at her in a heartbeat but never followed through on his threats because he knew his wife was capable of what she was saying. Besides, she was the beneficiary of a huge amount of his assets: houses, apartments, offshore accounts, several companies. They were tightly bound, and only death could break that bond. More and more often, Eugene thought, how good would it be to get rid of her, this hated woman? He would then be free again, and have a new, young, healthy woman who would bear him healthy children. But apparently Tiffany sensed his terrible thoughts and was careful to keep herself safe. They practically didn't live together anymore, but she didn't give him a divorce either, although he had offered her that easy option more than once. "No, why would you think of that?" She said, grinning evilly. "You cannot get rid of me so easily. Don't even think about it. The statement is already written, you know. And if anything happens, my lawyer will take it to court, and I'm sure it'll be on your docket." She's hired security, and getting close to her without publicity has been a problem. And he didn't need the press coverage. Eugene was wary of Tiffany's other threats, knowing full well that she could carry them out, as it appeared that even from the other side of the world, she would not let him live in peace. And all the time she was lecturing him about how much he'd had enough of her, how she'd fallen into her stupid religion. Damn it. As if the usual neuroses wasn't enough, she was poisoning Eugene's life to the fullest, and for the first time, he couldn't make up his mind to do anything. And yet, in this gloomy fog, a ray of hope suddenly shone through. One of the usual days she called him, and he grimaced as he picked up the phone. "Hello, it's me," she said sharply, without preamble. Tiffany and Eugene had arranged to meet. Why? To talk about their breakup options. "I think I've found a way out that works for both of us," Tiffany said. "You do?" Eugene was interested. "Well, look, what if this is another one of your tricks?" "No," Tiffany said calmly. "No tricks. I'm being honest. Come on, we can't discuss these things in public." They agreed on a time to meet, and that evening he drove to her apartment. His wife was in an unexpectedly good mood, carefully dressed and combed her hair. And in general, she looked pretty good. "Please, come in, sit down," she invited him, smiling. "What will you have to drink?" "Please, Tiffany, let's get to the point," Eugene said grudgingly. "No, of course." She nodded understandingly. "Then I'll have a drink." Tiffany had already had some drink and continued. "Don't worry. I've really come to the conclusion that we're better off apart." "Hallelujah." Eugene jokingly threw his hands up in the air. "What made you think of such an amazingly clever idea?" "No. Don't be sarcastic," Tiffany said. "I don't care about your jokes. Listen to me carefully. I'll divorce you, but only after you've done me one last favor." "Then I'm all ears," said Eugene, putting his foot on his leg and pouring himself some of the liquor from the decanter. "I intend to try one last time to have a baby," Tiffany said calmly, "and I need your fresh biomaterial." She clarified, anticipating his objection that he had already given her enough of his material, which was stored frozen. "The thing is," Tiffany continued, "I was recommended by a research institute here in Pittsburgh that does experimental research in this area. In short, they do something to the eggs that makes them act." I suppose Eugene agreed. "What if it doesn't work this time? Are you going to say I owe you something again?" "No," Tiffany shook her head. If it doesn't work out, we'll still get a divorce." "It's okay." "And if it works out?" Eugene asked a new question. "Then I'll finally have a baby that you promised not to claim," Eugene smirked. "Then why do I have to go through all this trouble? To get rid of me?" "Relax," Tiffany said. "Can you start a new family? You don't have a problem with that? But you can use any donor material, can't you?" Eugene wondered. "Why do you need me?" "Now you know," Tiffany sighed. "You don't want to raise someone else's child. You've said so yourself 100 times. Didn't you? Well, I don't want to take any chances either. Who knows what kind of heredity these donors have? At least I know you." She laughed ironically. "Yeah," Eugene shook his head. "You know, there's something in that, don't you? I'll think about it. But you realize you'll have to sign the papers. I need a guarantee." "Of course you do," Tiffany nodded. "So do I. That's why I'm consulting with my lawyers. And I've already prepared everything on my end. Here you go." She handed him a folder. "No, what is it?" Eugene asked, taking his time to look through the documents. "It's a draft agreement between you and me about everything we just discussed. It's about divorce and child rearing. If it works out, show it to your lawyers, and then we'll meet to make the necessary changes." "No, okay," Eugene said, standing up and picking up the folder. "See you later." A month and a half later, Christina received her new papers, took her mother's maiden name, and was now Arkeson. "Sorry, Daddy." She said to her father's pictures. "It won't be long, I promise. Hopefully, it won't be long before I can get justice and then reclaim our shared last name." In the lab, meanwhile, research, tests, and experiments were in full swing. Christine had seen Tiffany Diddenson several times already, coming in for treatments, but never her husband. She hadn't asked Oliver Johnson anything, thinking it unnecessary, and rightly judged that he would soon appear. She was patient and kept repeating to herself that it would have been much worse if their first meeting had taken place before her last name had been changed. Christine was right, and one morning, entering the treatment room, she found a middle-aged man, simply but elegantly dressed. He was standing in a pensive mood in front of the door of the biomaterial stall. "Well, at last," he exclaimed, turning to her. "Did you bring it? Let's hurry up." "Brought what?" Christina was surprised, and immediately she recognized him. The blood rushed to her face, and she realized at the same time that he meant the plastic container. Obviously, some unfortunate mistake had been made. For gathering all her courage, the girl smiles. "So the employee with the container will be right with you. I just came to pick up some forms." "Too bad," Eugene smiled. "I wouldn't have minded the presence of such a pretty girl." He winked at her. Christina grinned. She felt like she was ready to leap at him like a ravenous panther right now and tear him to shreds. But instead, she just smiled politely back, carefully pretending not to take the hit. She turned, took the forms, and left the office. Once in the hallway, she leaned back against the cold painted wall and covered her face with the palm of her hand, forcing herself to steady her breathing. "Christina, what are you doing?" Susan, who was passing by, was carrying the same unfortunate container. "I don't know." Christine raised her head, something in her eyes darkening subtly. "I slept badly today. My blood pressure is very low." "Go get some coffee." Susan nodded. Christine peeled away from the wall and indeed followed the good advice. Her mind cleared a little, and she began to berate herself for her stupid behavior. "I should have played along with him," she thought, "and what a fool I am. When will I get the chance now?" When she realized it, she promptly made another cup of espresso and dashed toward the treatment room. She sat down by the office, clutching the hot cup without even noticing how it was burning her fingers, and waited for her luck. The wait wasn't long, and the coffee didn't have time to get cold. A minute later, the door creaked open and let Eugene out. I apologize. Christine smiled dazzlingly at him. I came to make it up to you, and I brought you some coffee. Thank you, he was pleasantly surprised. But what was your fault? I should have been more courteous, Christina replied, feigning remorse. Will you forgive me? He smiled cheerfully. Or say, if you agree to dine with me tonight. Christina pretended as if she were going over her schedule in her mind. Nothing was more important to her than this meeting. I guess so, she smiled. Great. Then I'll pick you up at 7, Eugene said. Just tell me where. I'll be here at work, Christine smiled. I live way out of town, so I don't want to have to drive back and forth. I see, he nodded. Well, I'll see you tonight then. And went down the corridor, every now and then looking back at the strange and attractive girl, who smiled at him, embarrassed and blushing so sweetly. Yes, that's exactly the kind of girl I need, Eugene thought. Simple and sweet and direct and not spoiled. So I can be sure of my paternity. Their first date was exactly as Christine had imagined at an expensive restaurant. On the table is a bouquet of fresh white roses. Muted, pleasant music is playing. He is telling her something funny and entertaining. In his mind, she sits, smiles at him, responds sometimes inappropriately. She drinks small sips of white wine and strains all her inner resources not to jump up and break this heavy vase with delicate roses on its head. But every trial has an end. This awful rendezvous was over, and Christina, accompanied by her Emmy, went outside, where the north wind was blowing shrill and wet. It's nice out today, Eugene smiled, lifting the collar of his expensive woolen coat. Where can I drop you? To the train, said Christina. It's a long way for me, and you don't want to go any farther back. Worry. Eugene laughed. What worry is that? The driver will take you. He's got a job. Her companion persisted, just to the train. I'll take you from there. My parents are very strict, you know. Oh, then, of course, Eugene Maxwell looked at the girl appraisingly. Was she really as innocent as she seemed? That would be lucky. Somehow Christine herself did not realize how she had managed to capture his attention. She, of course, did not know about his marital discord, but soon he himself, heated by drink and her exciting company, told her about his problems, and the girl memorized the information and decided that it would all be very useful to her. And she said to him, as I understand you, it's terribly unfair when a feeling goes away and a person has to pull everything. Is your relationship dangerous? Exactly, Eugene exclaimed. About the bed, you are very right in what you say. By then, they'd already switched to you, though Christine still wouldn't allow him anything but gentle handshakes, and planned not to for a long time to come, maintaining the image she created. Meanwhile, back at the lab, things were not going well with patient Tiffany Didinson. After several attempts, it was possible to obtain viable eggs and even fertilize them, but the resulting embryo still didn't take root in the woman's body. What to say, finally, Oliver Johnson. The only thing left for us to do is to find a suitable surrogate, he said. Tiffany dropped her shoulders sorrowfully and cried, Don't, please don't. The professor hated all tears and sentimentality. Christina, may I see you? He called out from the adjoining office to his assistant. Please, Christina, explain to our patient all the intricacies of the surrogacy method. And he was quite pleased that he managed to avoid further heartwarming conversation with a nervous mommy. Here, take this. Christine gave the crying woman a clean, sterile tissue and waited for her to calm down. She felt a little sorry for the young lady, but she didn't forget for a second that she was the wife of her sworn enemy. I'll explain everything to you now. The girl turned on the big screen and put the right slides in the projector. Watch, your embryo will develop in another woman's body, but genetically it will remain exactly yours. It will be as if the egg was not nurtured by a hen, but it matured in an incubator, to put it crudely. Do you understand me? Yes, Tiffany nodded. I know you do, but I'd still like to do it myself. But it's not like you're losing anything, Christina reassured her. No problems with carrying, pregnancy, childbirth. All of that will be taken care of by another woman who will just be an incubator. And the genetic material will be yours and your husband's. And the baby that will be born will be 100 yours. He will not take anything from the surrogate mother's body, except for the necessary nutrition for growth and development. Unfortunately, to date, Science does not have incubators that could ensure the cultivation of embryos to full development. So all you have to do is find a suitable surrogate. Yes, Tiffany nodded, wiping away her tears. You explain everything so perfectly. Christina, the girl smiled. At your service, Christina. Tiffany looked at her studyingly. And you tell me yourself. She finally made up her mind and asked directly, would you be interested in being a surrogate for our child? So the girl marveled. Such a scenario had not occurred to her at all. Well, yes, Tiffany nodded calmly, a feverish light in her eyes. You'll get a fee that will allow you to support yourself and your family for the rest of your life. But Christina didn't even find something to answer right away. But I didn't think. And you think hard, Tiffany said. She stood up and walked closer. I promise you that you won't regret it if you accept. But where am I going to find a surrogate now? Judge for yourself. And then I've read how often it ends up with these artificial mothers not giving the children back to their legal parents. I'm absolutely not going to risk that kind of risk. And you, girl, are smart and understand everything so well. You certainly won't be taking a child who is genetically unrelated to you. Christina, still in shock, could only nod. Tiffany took the gesture as agreement and exclaimed happily, "That's great. I knew you could be trusted. Our attorneys will prepare all the paperwork. I really wish this would be over sooner. I assure you, my dear, you will not regret your decision. You will never regret it." She smiled encouragingly, stroked the shocked girl on the shoulder and left the office. And Christina was left with her mouth open at this turn of events. What are you garden variety head? Clever Johnson, to whom she briefly, blushing and stammering, outlined what had happened half an hour after the patient left, laughed heartily. It's simply impossible, I assure you. First of all, you're not the right age. By law, a surrogate must be at least 20 years old. Secondly, she must have at least one healthy child of her own. That's it, and the delusional fantasies of our overly impressionable patient should not bother you. But calm down, he added, seeing Christine nervously tearing a paper napkin into small shreds. We've already had impressive results with her eggs. Whether these embryos will take root or not is not that important to us. We now have material for many years to come. You could write hundreds of articles, publish a report on your experiments, and your contribution will undoubtedly be highly valued by the admissions committee. I shall intercede for you myself, my dear. Thank you. Barely squeezed out Christina, who no longer knew what to think. That same evening she told Eugene about the offer his wife had made. Really? He laughed. So she's got a crush on you too. Apparently so. Christina exhaled and drank an entire glass of wine in a gulp, something that had never happened to her before. Forget it, Eugene said nonchalantly. That's a silly woman. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But nonsense. The woman had no intention of backing down. After meeting with her husband, she categorically demanded that Christina Arkhipova be the surrogate mother for their child. Why would you do that? Shouted Eugene, furious. There are plenty of other women around, and anyone will give birth with just a finger. Remember, Christina is right for me for several reasons. Tiffany calmly answered him and smiled wickedly, looking him straight in the eye. First of all, she's your new date, isn't she? Oh my God. Eugene rolled his eyes. How did you know? You're not the only one with eyes and ears everywhere. Tiffany said triumphantly. And secondly, she understands the process very well. Explained it all to me herself. Didn't you think she might say no? Eugene blustered. Why would she refuse? His wife asked, out of great love for you. She laughed ironically. Open your eyes. She's only with you for money. Did you really imagine that such a shabby subject could attract the attention of such a young lady? Before your position and money, you're nothing but a pittance. A zero without a stick, Tiffany raged. Well, he rose threateningly from his chair, but the woman beat him to it, raising her hand warningly with her cell phone. One tap and my security will be here immediately. Do you need any extra witnesses? No? Then calm down and hear me out to the end. Eugene sighed heavily and sat back down. Okay then, Tiffany rubbed her temples thoughtfully. I want this girl to carry our baby. I don't know if you've already slept with her or not, and I don't care about that. Before the procedure, the doctor will still check to see if she's already pregnant. I suggest you take it slow and slow down. Otherwise, I'm out of the game. And don't forget the agreement, she said threateningly. Eugene snickered again. glaring angrily at her. "Calm down," Tiffany grinned. "You're going to get some too. For one thing, it could very well turn out to be a multiple pregnancy. At that point, we'll split the babies fairly, and after that, we'll go our separate ways. And if there's only one baby, it's mine. She'll have more children for you." The woman laughed bitterly. "You keep forgetting that we're talking about a living person," Eugene said angrily. "And if she refuses, it's your job to convince her," Tiffany said triumphantly. "That would be my guarantee that she wouldn't take my baby. Because if it was any other woman, even you and all your money couldn't stop it, you know? But not even me. But this is different. It's not just my baby, it's your freedom. So it's either that or nothing. This conversation is over." Eugene was ready to kill her. But instead, all he had to do was clench his teeth tighter and nod his head in agreement. Hell, he'd convince anyone and anything to get rid of his bed and his wife once and for all. Now, however, there was a serious conversation to be had with Christine. Eugene thought long and hard about how to approach the matter carefully and gently, how to convince her to agree. But when they finally met to talk, this strange and mysterious girl surprised. "Eugene, I wanted to tell you," she began hesitantly. "Your wife has offered me to be a surrogate for your child." "Yes, I know," he nodded, certain that an ugly scene like the ones he was so familiar with at Tiffany's mercy was about to ensue. And while he was agonizing over his choice of words, Christina continued. "So I decided that I would do it." He stared at her dumbfounded, unable to believe what he'd heard, and only managed to squeeze out the wrong thing to say. "Me? No, to free you from this hateful marriage that prevents us from being together," Christina said to him affectionately. "Yes, my girl," Eugene said numbly. Then realized she felt that way about him. So Tiffany had been completely wrong, and she'd said that Christine only wanted money from him. His self-esteem skyrocketed, and now he was willing to do anything for this sweet girl. "Oh my God, you have no idea how much you're going to help me with this. But there are some complications," Christina frowned slightly, "and you'll have to help me." Talk. He looked at her with adoration. "I'll need a new passport with a date of birth 2 years older and the birth certificate of my first child. The law is such that it mandates these conditions for a potential surrogate." "We'll do it," rejoiced Eugene, who had expected the girl to start making conditions for herself, asking for money, property, and the like. But this saint, as it seemed to him, only wanted to help. "You will not treat me worse after all that has happened, will you?" she asked him hopefully. "No, God be with you." "Of course not." He put his arms around her and kissed her tenderly on the cheek. "I'll have you as the Virgin Mary, for you are." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Each-us-six. I am innocent in terms of intimacy," Christina told him calmly. "Take care of yourself for your future husband. Do you think this pregnancy will count?" She laughed. "No, for me, no way." Eugene looked at her with shining eyes. "Christina, my favorite. Oh, and one more thing." He realized. "You better move to the city, closer to the hospital, to a doctor's office. You never know. And by the way, what about your parents?" "I'll tell my parents that I'm going to study in New York with a clear conscience," Christina lied. "They are my people simple. They do not need to know everything. Right?" "That's right," Eugene approved her eagerly. "The fewer people who know, the better. I'll find you a fancy apartment. I'll always be there for you. And you'll have the best daily care." Oh my God. He was so moved, he even brushed away a tear. "Rejoice, rejoice." Christina thought to herself, smiling gently at him. "Let's see how you sing when everything is in my hands." She had already made her grandiose plans of communication and was not going to deviate from it one iota. From the lab, she had to leave temporarily. Christina wrote an application for a leave of absence at her own expense. Personally listened to the HHs and HAs of colleagues about her decision. Long lectures, Oliver Johnson, on the fact that very unpleasant procedures in 9 months of her life is not worth any money, and did everything in its own way. At last the decisive day had come. The day in which she would hold the fates of the 2 men who had once taken her parents' lives in her hands. She wasn't sure about Tiffany, but that she knew and was covering for her husband. Christine didn't doubt it one bit. He himself had hinted to her that he couldn't get a divorce so easily because she was blackmailing him with an old story. "Christina, how's it going in there?" he asked the female employee who had come to perform the procedure, peeking into the changing stall. Christina, who was just getting into her hospital clothes, smiled. "Yes, I'm fine, thank you." "You're not worried at all?" Annie, with whom they had more or less become friends during their work together, asked her sympathetically. But no, that wasn't the right word. Christina wasn't going to be friends with anyone here at all. "Why should I be worried? I'm in good hands." Laughed the girl, wanting to translate everything into a joke. In half an hour, everything was finished, and Christine was taken to the ward, where she had to spend several hours in a horizontal position. After that, it was safe to leave and spend time as usual. The examination that would show whether the embryos had taken root would be in a week's time. If there is no result, then a repeat in another 3 days. If not even then it would be all over again. Christina was very hopeful that her young and healthy body would accept the tiny lives at once. Yes, she had been implanted with 2 viable human embryos at once. This is often done, increasing the chances that at least one of them will take root. Eugene and Tiffany greeted her in the room with a huge bouquet of roses. They looked like a happily married couple, and if you didn't know better, you'd think they were. "There's our mommy," Tiffany said happily. "But how are you, sweetie? All is well?" Christina smiled at her. "I feel great." God willing. God willing. Tiffany closed her eyes and mumbled a prayer. Eugene looked at her and hid a disgruntled face. "All right, outsiders out." Another staff member entered the room. "Christine needs rest and quiet now." Let's go. The Didinson couple obediently responded. "See you soon, Christina." "Thank you." Christine thanked the woman sincerely. "They have already pumped my brain with their families," she said to the employee. "You signed up for this yourself." The woman shook her head. "Now you have to put up with it." "Yes, but everything must be in moderation." The girl grinned. "I didn't sign up to listen to them around the clock. I'll give birth and let them do what they want." "Wouldn't it be a pity to give it to them?" The woman doubted. After all, 9 months, under the heart to carry a child. "Yes, but not mine," Christina said sharply. "That's it. I want to rest." I got it. The employee went out and closed the door behind her. Christina sighed, leaned back on the pillows, and closed her eyes. It seemed to her that she could almost physically feel 2 tiny living beings, hostile to her, trying their best to take root inside her. And yet she sincerely hoped they would succeed. They kept her in the room until morning because her temperature had risen slightly. "It happens." She was reassured by the doctor who performed the procedure. "It's normal in principle, but we need to keep you under observation just in case." Christine didn't mind. She didn't care where she spent her time, here or in the new, comfortable apartment that Didinson had rented for her. The apartment was in a new apartment complex, almost in the center of Pittsburgh, with a gorgeous view of one of the many She was to live there until she gave birth. However, Christina was not going to waste time. She enrolled in a training course at the university. Now the girl was studying textbooks, preparing for future enrollment. That first night spent in the hospital room, Christine had a strange dream, as if she was standing in a dark corridor. All around was emptiness, but a faint light was shining in the distance. In that light, she saw 2 beings. They came closer, holding hands. Christine realized that they were 2 small children, a boy and a girl. In her dream, she had even seen their faces, but after waking up, she remembered almost nothing, only vague, blurred images. While she shouted, it seemed to the girl that something had changed. She put her hand on her stomach and listened to the sensations. Suddenly, she felt a faint tremor as if a small vein were pulsing. Of course, at this early stage, no amount of probing would tell her anything. But Christine believed that everything had gone well and a new life had taken hold inside her. A follow-up examination, an ultrasound, confirmed her confidence. Both embryos had taken root. The Didinsons were overjoyed. Christina was literally showered with gifts. Her new apartment was littered with bouquets, packages, and boxes in beautiful packaging. The refrigerator was bursting with delicacies, but the girl did not want anything. Even strange, because pregnant women usually want something, don't they? But apparently, it's not time yet, Christina decided, and went into the study of pathological anatomy. Class was interrupted by a phone call. Christine annoyingly reached for her smartphone, thinking it was Eugene. But another name popped up on the screen, Natalie Phillips. The girl rejoiced. "How are you?" "I'm fine." The familiar voice replied. Where did you disappear to? You haven't called or written for a week. I don't have time because of work, Christina said. But everything is fine. I'm studying anatomy and preparing for admission. I'm happy for you. Natalie's voice sounded a little anxious. I had a strange dream today. It was silly even. Christine remained silent, not speaking. Natalie continued. It was like you had twins, can you imagine? Maybe someday, she laughed to hide her surprise. How could she feel it? But right now, I don't have time for children. All right, Natalie was clearly relieved to hear that her favorite was doing well. So you're okay. Don't worry, please. I'll say goodbye then. Don't disappear. Call me sometime. Okay, honey, of course. I'm so sorry. Christine hung up. The conversation had left her with an unpleasant residue. She decided it was time for the next stage of her plan, to text Eugene asking for a meeting. He flew in 20 minutes later, as if he'd been waiting for it. How's my favorite girl in the world? Eugene hugged and kissed Christina. She had to put up with all this, but the circumstances were fortunate. She wouldn't have to put up with more intimate contact. She was willing to do even that just to get her way. It's all right, don't worry. Christine looked at him with all the tenderness she could muster. Eugene, we need to talk about this. Both babies are likely to be born safely. At least I hope so. Of course they will. He interrupted her and kissed her palms. You are my gift of fate. Wait, Christina gently pulled away. But I would like one of these children to stay with me. Do you understand? You agreed with Tiffany that she would take only one, didn't you? Yes, Eugene was glowing with happiness. And the other one will be ours, my dear. That's exactly what we're talking about. Christina talked to a lawyer. Legally, she can have both of them. You and I need to keep our baby safe. Christina said with a concerned face, playing up the anxiety to keep me calm. Do you understand what you want? Just tell me. I'll do everything. We need to prepare the papers for your divorce with her in advance and at the same time about our marriage with you, so that she will sign them as soon as the children are born. And we too, so that we can get married right away. Okay? Chuckles, and most importantly, we have to bribe the doctors to tell her that the second child is dead. Why? Eugene wondered. So that she's guaranteed to have only one. Don't you understand? Christina looked at Eugene with concern and bewilderment that he really didn't get it. She, too, needed a guarantee that she could influence him, and for that she needed his own child. By the way, do you want a son or a daughter? She asked him cheerfully, to lighten the mood a little. For son, he smiled dreamily like a boy. An heir. Somehow I think they're of different sexes, Christina told him. Then it's settled. Talk to the doctors beforehand. Don't show her ours and don't tell her he's alive. All right, said Eugene. You're so thoughtful. The time of the birth came without a hitch. Close to her due date, Christine was very swollen. Her huge belly was half a minute before she entered the room. If she walked through the door, the babies felt great, and their surrogate mother had a sore back, swollen feet, and dizziness for all of the last 3 months. So she was admitted to a hospital room. There is no danger for the children yet, the doctor said during the checkups. But you may develop preeclampsia on the background of hydrocele. Therefore, we will do a planned cesarean. Okay? Agreed, Christina. I don't care. Do what's best for the babies. She continued to maintain her rainbow image, and Eugene and Tiffany sat next to her, smiling contentedly. The contractions started a week ahead of schedule, and they had to do an emergency C-section rather than a planned one. Christine had a high fever, and while the doctors tried to bring it down, she was in terrible pain. Finally, she was taken to the operating room and anesthesia was given. There was the first baby cry, then another. The voices of the midwives merged into a ragged hum. Christina was given a shot in her vein and she passed out. Where am I? What about the babies? She said weakly as she regained consciousness. It's all right, Eugene was beside her. He squeezed her hand lightly. But, unfortunately, one didn't survive. Wow. Christina rose so swiftly that she almost ripped out the wires and tubes. Just then she saw Tiffany beside her and remembered their agreement. It's such a shame, the woman wiped away her tears. But at least one is alive. One of my girls, my sunshine. Thank you for her, Christina. Do you want to see her? No, Christina said. I don't want to. You should, Tiffany agreed hastily. I'm going to go get well soon. Wait, what about the papers? Christina said worriedly. It's okay, Eugene winked at her faintly. We've already signed everything. Good, Christine sighed with relief, and then she jumped up. But we also have to now. He squeezed her hand reassuringly and lowered his voice. Take your time. Let her go. At the same time, the room door behind Tiffany slammed shut, and Christina said demandingly, have them bring the paperwork and our son. Eugene took out his cell phone and called someone. 10 minutes later, a man in an expensive suit came in and pulled sheets from a folder. Please, I was the marriage certificate that Christina and Eugene signed, and the baby's birth certificate so she could see it with her own eyes. What are we going to name him? The happy father asked. Christina shrugged. Whatever you want. Any name will suit me. Let's go with Daniel then, Eugene said, smiling. Daniel. Christina, stunned, not yet fully recovered from the surgery. The name reminded her of her murdered father. Yes, in honor of my grandfather, an important name, Eugene said. It's short for Danny, and that's what we'll call him. Bring it to me, Christina asked. I'm now a legal wife with the last name Didnson. I want to see my wrinkle baby. A red face tightly spun into a cocoon. It didn't elicit any tender feelings from her as she'd expected. My son, my heir. He exclaimed, my son, my heir. He exclaimed, turning the bundle now and then. Where is he going? How handsome you are, how healthy. Okay, I want to get some sleep. Christina stopped him, calming down. Mommy said she wants to rest. But let's go. The newly minted dad turned to the infant. Finally alone, Christina tiredly closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. The first 2 weeks after the birth were very difficult. The stitches were sore. The tests were bad, but she bravely endured everything. In addition, she constantly had to put the baby to the breast. But Christina did not do anything that the nurses recommended on purpose, and the milk burned out. She got mastitis and was put on antibiotics. She survived this too, with a heavy heart and thinking only about one thing: how she could be discharged as soon as possible and feel strong and free again. And that long-awaited day came. Her stitches were removed, and she and the baby were discharged. Happy Eugene took them not to the apartment where Christine lived before the birth, but to his luxurious country mansion on the shores of Lake Erie. A few more weeks passed quietly. She rested and walked, and the baby was taken care of by numerous nannies. Christina didn't have to do anything, as he was on artificial feeding for a tick. A couple of times a day, she took him in her arms just to look at him in front of Eugene. And all the while, she waited agonizingly for one crucial event to happen, and she did. One warm spring day, a cavalcade of police cars with flashing lights lined up outside the Didson mansion. With sirens blaring, they pulled up, and the whole quiet neighborhood was filled with that piercing howl. What the hell? Her husband looked irritably out the second-story windows. Did something happen to the neighbors? But within minutes, the cops were not at the neighbor's house, but in their yard. Spread out, Didson security, Eugene Maxwell. A man in civilian clothes announced in a metallic voice, stepping onto the shiny parquet floor in dirty streets. What's the matter exactly? Eugene answered him angrily. Don't you know who I am? I do, nodded the man. You don't know who I am. Allow me to introduce myself. Special Investigator Anthony Samuels of the SID. You are charged with the premeditated murder of Daniel Williams and Mary Alexanders. You can call your lawyer. Anything you say can be used against you. What the hell do you think you're doing? Eugene shrieked and turned around and said to his young wife standing nearby, Honey, this is some kind of misunderstanding. Don't worry. Please don't worry. I'll sort it out and be back soon. Okay, Christina nodded calmly. I'll be waiting for you. The man with his hands cuffed behind him was led to the police car and seated behind the bars in the back. The cavalcade drove off with a howl of sirens, deafening the entire cottage community. Don't worry. It might still be all right, one of the nannies said timidly to Christina as she watched the scene from the window. It won't be all right, Christina turned to her, and the woman gasped in horror. The eyes of the landlady glowed with wild fury, and there was a broad, joyous smile on her face. Eugene Didson was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment in a high-security colony. This was taken care of course, by his young fake wife. After their first meeting, she went to the prosecutor's office and the investigation department, demanding a new investigation into her parents' deaths. Several attempts ended in failure. Nobody wanted to listen to the girl, but she did not give up and came again and again demanding justice. Finally, one of the investigators, a young, handsome guy, got into the situation and agreed to talk to her. Christina told him everything honestly about herself, about Dickinson's heinous crime, and about how he had paid off the investigation then, many years ago. "Understand, Christina, I am entirely on your side," this fellow investigator told her then. "But it's not like we don't have any single piece of evidence of his guilt, which means there's no reason to return the case from the archives for a new investigation." "Will there be evidence?" the girl said calmly. "Only give me a deadline." A few months later, she brought him a tape of a conversation between herself and her new husband, Dickinson Eugene Maxwell. On the tape, she could clearly be heard asking what it was that ex-wife Tiffany was blackmailing him with. "Yeah, there was a case," Eugene replied with a laugh. "Many years ago, in one town, I had to get rid of a small and brash competitor. It was his own fault. He just kept getting in the way. They explained it to him once, but he didn't get it the second time." "Where's that statement now?" Then the special people took him down. "Aren't you afraid Tiffany kept threatening him with her statement?" "Come on, I'm not
Allegedly,
a fool,
she wrote
it's
it
been sitting
and
in
gave
my
it to her
safe
lawyer
for a long
with
time.
all the details
Gave it
to
to
her
her in
in
exchange for the baby along with the divorce papers. That's it." During the new investigation, the statement was removed from the safe, and Tiffany herself was brought in as a witness and then as an accomplice to the crime. What would happen? The prosecutor proved that she knew of the impending atrocity, but did nothing to report it to law enforcement. The murder of her parents,
given a little
only yes, and
$2.5
finally
million
received the
Eugene
punishment
only
that
answered
some
some
part
parts
of the
questioned
question
how
was
she
genuine.
was,
Standing on the
sister,
stand
beside
beside
the
the
judge,
judge,
this is
shock
circumstance
for the
he had never
prosecution.
imagined
Present
how
a
small
small
child,
meeting.
no
This
previous
previous
knowledge
meeting
for
was
one
so had
purpose,
given him his
to
long-awaited
avenge the
deaths
deaths
of my Traeger parents.
finally,
Daniel and
he
Mary,
barely spoke.
who were brutally
It doesn't
blown
work
up in
like
an
that.
automobile on his cruel
Christina
orders.
only grinned contentedly
"Now you
in
will rot in
response to his
prison,"
words,
she added,
and walked out
looking
of the
straight
hall
into
with her
Eugene's
head
eyes.
held proudly
"And
high.
your son will go to the orphanage where
A few months later,
Dickinson
Mr.
Eugene was found dead in his prison cell. He had committed suicide. Tiffany Dickinson, after serving her probation, left town somewhere with her infant daughter. Little Daniel Dickinson was placed in an orphanage in the state where he spent the first few years of his life. Christina once again changed her last name, now permanently, to her father's, and she received a new passport. She successfully entered the university at the chosen faculty and studied perfectly and with pleasure. Most of Dickinson's huge fortune was confiscated, but what was left was more than enough for a secure life. Christine bought herself an apartment and put the rest of the money in the bank at a good interest rate for such a large capital, and everything seemed to be fine. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to, but at times she was attacked by an unreasonable longing, a vague feeling of anxiety, restlessness. What it was, she didn't understand for a long time, until one day she came across a small obituary in the city news column. Tiffany Ellison Dickinson, formerly of City Hall, had passed away prematurely after a long illness. The following summarized the woman's accomplishments and the milestones of her life's journey. Christina wondered. A few days later, she made inquiries and found out that Tiffany and Eugene's young daughter had also been placed in an orphanage. Some confusion formed in her soul. After this news, she decided to go on vacation to her hometown to unwind and visit Natalie Phillips. The first night in that tiny kitchen, Christine cried and told her kind teacher everything that had happened to her in the distant northern city. Then they sat without sleep for a long, long time until morning, talking, drinking strong tea, crying, and talking again. 2 weeks later, in one of the orphanages in the Leningrad region, a small, withdrawn boy was brought by a disgruntled teacher into a room where a pretty young woman was already waiting for him. "Hello, my friend," affectionately said to him this unfamiliar aunt. "Do you know who I am?" The boy shook his head sullenly. "I'm your mother." She smiled at him. "I was lost, and now I'm found. Forgive me, son." "Mommy." The boy shrieked and threw himself on her neck. "Mom, I knew you'd come." "That's right, so I came back for you." She hugged the boy and lifted him in her arms. "Now come on, let's go. We still have to pick up your little sister." Christine, having drawn up all the necessary papers, became the official mother of 2 little orphans who were born thanks to her, although they were not her biological children. Somehow, unbeknownst to her, she managed to love the children of her sworn enemy as her own, and became a caring and dear mother to them. In addition, they have a grandmother, Natalie Phillips, who moved to live with her only real family.
Selena, look how handsome John is, Betty told her friend. She was 6 months pregnant herself. Spit, her friend looked at her. Laughed Betty. That's good. The girl lifted her son in her arms and kissed him. You're so superstitious. Betty always knew that. God protects him, Selena said. They had been friends since high school, and now that they had both graduated and married, one was already a mother and the other was just getting ready. Where are they? Betty looked at her watch. I don't know, they should be here by now, she shrugged. Today was their special day. It was on this date that Betty and Selena had met their husbands. Yes, Harry and Carlos were friends. They'd been walking the streets of the city like girls, and apparently, as fate would have it, they'd met two friends. Since then, exactly 5 years had passed. They played weddings 1 month apart. At first, they wanted it to be on the same day, but then the girls changed their minds. And today they gathered to celebrate a small anniversary of their acquaintance, waiting only for their husbands. Are they knocking? Betty looked at her friend when she heard a sound. I don't know, go look. Carlos has keys. She looked toward the front door. Betty got up and went to open it. Indeed, there were young men standing on the landing with so many bags in their hands that they couldn't even knock properly. Wow, Harry, she can feel you even through the doors. Carlos looked at his friend. Come on, we were just scraping by. They entered the apartment. Where are you going? The girls looked at the huge bags. Now we'll get everything ready and sit at the table. Her husband did not answer her question. And he and Carlos really went into the kitchen, closed the doors, told the wives to wait a little. They looked at each other and quietly went into the room. That's the way it always was. Betty and Selena were very good guys. They were always in charge. The wives just had to be there for them and love them. Well, that was it. An hour later, Harry came out of the kitchen. He and his friend had dragged a large table to the middle of the room and began carrying the dishes they had just prepared themselves onto it. Boys, did you really do all this yourselves? Betty marveled at it every time. Enough already, her husband kissed her on the cheek. They sat down at the table. Everything looked delicious. Carlos poured wine into glasses. We thought of you too. The young man smiled and pulled another bottle from under the table. You what? I'm nursing and Betty's pregnant, Selena told him immediately. It's non-alcoholic, hubby parried. Good, then let's have it. She set up 2 glasses. It was so family-friendly, the friends sat around, reminiscing about everything they had, how they met, what they talked about, and the rest. I feel sick. Betty covered her mouth with the palm of her hand. Hurry up, Harry took her hand. She didn't return to the table again. In the evening, the couple went home. I don't believe there is such a friendship, Betty said to her husband in the evening. How can it be? Because we have one. He looked surprised. Yes, I realized that, but still, she was silent. But it was true. In all the years of their friendship, neither the boys among themselves, nor the girls, nor their families had ever quarreled. There had been a few misunderstandings, but never a big fight. Are you going out? Selena called her friend. I can't, it's my stomach, she admitted. You need to go to the hospital, the girl worried. She was silent, counting what Betty's due date was. I'd already thought about it, but I want to wait for Caustic, she said, but she was in pain. When are you due? Selena finally asked. In 3 days, clutched Betty. She was already sitting down. It hurt so much. Urgently, call an ambulance, her friend advised. Okay, there was silence on the other end of the phone. BT, Selena shouted, but there was silence in response. The girl crouched down in the hallway. She could hear her name being called from the tube, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even inhale or exhale. The pain was so intense. A key was inserted into the keyhole. The girl turned around. Harry entered the apartment. He was in a good mood. He saw his wife on the floor. Everything immediately changed. He realized that he needed to go to the hospital. Now, love, 1 minute. He ran to the phone and dialed 911. Help! She held out her hand to him, but he didn't. He just walked over and lifted her into his arms. Everything was ready. All that was left was to wait for the paramedics. They arrived. Harry carried his wife to the car. They took her to the hospital. The young man wanted to go with them, but they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him in the hospital anyway. She was already in the labor room. There were doctors all around. "Come on, honey, soon you'll be a mom," the midwife commanded her. There was a baby crying in the room. Betty looked at the baby and cried too. She was now the mother of the most beautiful baby girl, Lucy. She took her tiny hand as she lay on her chest. "Congratulations," the doctor whispered in her ear. "Thank you." The girl lay there, somewhere in the distance, still feeling the pain that had just been so intense that it hurt to even remember. After that, she was transferred to the ward, and Harry was already standing outside the window, waiting for his daughter to be shown to him. "Look, it's your daddy." She brought the little bundle to the window. "And my husband just cried." He shouted words of gratitude and wiped his tears. That made 6 of us. Her friends and her husband greeted her after she was discharged. "Yes, we'll become relatives," laughed the girl's mother. "I don't mind," Carlos said. They went home and decided to organize a small table. Lucy was a quiet child. After she was fed, she fell asleep and let her parents spend a few hours with their friends. John was a little over a year old. The boy was curious about who was brought in and put in the crib. He stood looking at his future girlfriend. "Why, Lucy?" Selena asked. "I don't know," looked at her and realized that's what she was going to be called. Betty turned to her husband. "It's okay. It's a great name." He kissed her hands. After a brief sit-down, the friends left, leaving the young parents alone with the baby. Lucy was growing up, as on the first day she was very quiet, not crying much, only at night when it was feeding time. Now Selena and Betty were walking together in the park with their strollers. "We should get together," Selena suggested. Yes, her friend agreed with her. They were visiting with Betty and Harry. The friends were sitting on the couch watching John and Lucy discussing something on their own. The girl was still so young that she was babbling incomprehensible things, but the boys seemed to understand everything. Let them grow up together, and then they'll be together too. Carlos couldn't get enough of the children's play. "I don't mind," Selena said, just as she had at the maternity ward. "Neither do we," Harry turned to her. That's how the boys grew up, always close by. John went to daycare late. He was practically 3 years old. Betty had tried to find a place for Lucy too. Now the boy and the girl were in the same garden. Their mothers picked them up every day, and they walked home together. When it was time to go to school, Selena would not put John with her stream. They waited a year, and the kids walked to September 1 together. "We did it," cheered the moms as their kids walked to class with their teacher. Yes, they hugged. From that moment on, John and Lucy became inseparable. They sat at the same desk, went everywhere together. They were even teased as bride and groom. "How are you doing at school?" a mother would ask her daughter when she got home. "Not you, but you," the girl told her. She was in the 7th grade. "Good. How are you doing in school?" smiled the woman. She was pleased that they had once made the right choice. John was sticking up for Lucy now. He loved her and would never let her get hurt. "Everything is fine. Today I talked to Selena. He said that after school we'll get married right away," blushed the girl. "Where are you in a hurry ahead of the whole life?" Did not understand the mother, but did not have anything against it. They gathered with friends, the children together, they too. "You know what my daughter said to me today?" They were sitting around the table again. "We know. John pleased us too," laughed Selena. The husbands looked at each other. They too were supportive of the children. School was going great. The boy and girl didn't have to run anywhere. They often spent time at home. "Exams are coming up. Have you prepared?" Betty came into the room. "Of course," turned at the same time, guys. "Good, I believe in you." She walked out and they were alone again. At prom, everyone was together again. "Remember standing here with you when our boys went to 1st grade, whispered Selena to Betty. "Of course, it seems like yesterday to me." The woman brushed away a tear. "And now we're already seeing them off," sighed the other. "Nothing. I believe that everything will be fine." Their husbands joined them. That's how it was. When the official part was over and the graduates went to greet the dawn, John asked for silence on the bus. Everyone looked at him in surprise and fell silent. "Lucy," he knelt in the aisle by her seat, "will you marry me?" The classmates applauded. Some started whistling and hooting. "Of course I will." She hugged him and took the ring. John stood up. He hugged Lucy. Ever since he was a little boy, this boy knew that she would be his one and only and his favorite. They reached the place. Everything was calm and Jacoptic. The boys separated from the big company and spent time alone. Look, showed the girl the ring to her mom in the morning. Guys, why in silence? Why did not tell us anything? She took Lucy's hand and looked closer at the jewelry. I did not know, John so decided. Probably today we will gather, modestly answered the daughter. Okay, I'll go call Selena. The mother walked down the hallway and smiled. Everything was just as they wanted it to be. The families gathered together. They congratulated their children and rejoiced that they would soon be relatives. Well, shall we go? Lucy looked at her lover. It was only a few days before their wedding and they had a lot to do. Yes, nodded the boy. Everyone was busy with business. Lucy had taken her entrance exams only a week ago. John hadn't joined her. He was due to serve in the army. The wedding was in the last days of August. After that, Lucy started to prepare for her studies. John received a summons. It was not very happy news, but the guy did not show any sign. How am I here without you? She snuggled up to her husband in the evening. They were sitting at home in front of the TV. Lucy, you're at it again. He was nervous. What's the big deal if I'm worried? She looked up at her lover. You think I'm not worried? They talked about it every day, so the topic got a little tiresome. John, for some time before the draft, came to the same city where the girl studied. He didn't want to live away from his wife. Will you come with me, or by the weekend we'll be at your parents'? Asked her boyfriend, when before his departure was only a few days. Of course, I will go. She did not understand his question, because she loved him so much that she was ready to go to the army. The girl wrote a statement so that she would not be lost in her studies. The reason was serious, so no one would not interfere. Selena and Betty were crying. The fathers just kept silent. Friends gathered around the table, all raising their glasses and doing something. Dismissed early, Lucy and John went into the room. Will you wait? He looked at the girl. Why do you ask? Of course, yes, she kissed him. Tears rolled down from her eyelashes by themselves. Lucy couldn't help it. In the morning at the train station, she stood and stared blankly at the departing train. Don't worry, daughter. Time will pass quickly. We will support you. Her mother-in-law hugged her. Thank you. She turned away and walked away. Now the girl wanted only one thing, to go with her head into study, to do something, only if the hours and weeks would pass faster. Daughter, maybe you should move temporarily to a dormitory. Why spend money on rented accommodation? Her mother asked her. Yes, I also thought about it. There are girls there. Everything will not be so sad in the evenings. Lucy has already packed things for the move. Good, you're a good girl. The woman hugged her. John wrote often. In his letters he described where he was, what they were doing there. Lucy answered him with the same frequency. Why are you always sitting here like a mouse in a hole? The roommate came in after a walk. I'm studying. She pointed to her notes. I'm also studying, but you don't need to wave your hand at yourself. Come with us tomorrow. You'll have a good time, she suggested to her. I don't know what my husband will say. She looked at the sealed envelope that was to be sent tomorrow. I think he'll be all for it. Julia sat down on her bed. Okay, we'll see tomorrow, Lucy agreed. The next day in the evening, she and a few other girls went for a walk around town. They decided to sit for a while in the recreation area, which was in the very center. There was a fountain, of course. At this time of year it was not working, and a few benches, their girlfriends and occupied. Why did you get married so early? Julia asked the girl. I don't know, John wanted it that way, she answered. It is clear that nothing is clear, she laughed. Lucy heard the girl and looked around. She didn't know who knew her. Archie, she saw her classmate. How are you here? He came over, with a few other kids with him. I'm studying. Why are you here and not in the army? John's gone. She motioned for the boy to sit down. And I got in. I have a deferment. He looked at the girls. He remembered that he was not alone. I see. But my husband didn't want to, she said sadly. Oh yes, he's your husband. Archie remembered the proposal and the wedding. Yes, she noticed that the young men had approached the girls and were now getting acquainted. There's nothing to be bored of, the young man said cheerfully. Come with us. It'll be fun. It probably won't work tonight. Lucy turned to Julia, looking to her for support. Why not? The time is still childish. We'll have time for everything. The neighbor was already sitting next to the guy. Okay, the girl was not worried. Archie was a normal guy. He would not give her offense. That evening, they went to the young men's apartment. They rented it for everyone. The guys quickly organized the table. Funny dishes started to appear on it. Wine, melted cheese, bread, leftover sausage, buns, student kit. "I'm so glad I met you today," served Archie a glass of Lucy's red liquid. "I won't," she pushed the container away with her hand. "Come on, here's to introductions," he insisted. The girl looked at the others. Everyone was having fun. They were already drinking heavily. Well, she took the glass. Archie raised his own. They silently touched, and Lucy took a sip. She had tasted champagne once before, when they had been married, so she didn't like the tart liquid. The girl wanted to put the glass on the table, but the guy didn't let her do it. In the evening, when it was already very dark outside the window, Lucy and Archie sat in a small room on his bed. The girl's head was spinning. She was smiling. "Lucy, do you know how much I loved you at school?" he whispered in her ear, hugging her himself. "Archie, I'm married." She pulled his hands away. "I know, and I'm not saying anything, but my husband's not around." His breath tickled her neck. It was funny. I'm not like that," she said in a slurred voice. "Okay, I can wait." He kissed her cheek, then stood up, helped her up. "Maybe we'll go to the dorm. We have school tomorrow." She saw Julia making out with one of the guys. "Do you want me to walk you out?" Archie asked her. Yeah, she wasn't going to stay here. They reached the dormitory without adventure. Archie hugged Lucy on the steps. "I'll come back tomorrow. We'll go for a walk," he told her, his face so close it looked like he was going to kiss her. Lucy herself doesn't know what was wrong with her at that moment, but she wanted it. Archie touched her lips gently and let go. She walked into the building, went up to her room, lay in bed, and instantly fell asleep. In the morning, she walked to class and remembered what had happened yesterday. Why she acted like that, what she was missing. It was embarrassing. She had only met Julia at school, and she was cheerful. "Are you going to the guys today?" she asked her friend. No, the girl didn't want to. But no one considered her opinion. Archie came to pick her up in the evening. He was waiting for her on watch while she got ready. All day long, the girl knew she wasn't going anywhere in the evening. But as soon as she was told that a young man had come, she gladly began to get ready. "Hi," she walked out to him. "What took you so long? It's like a date," he laughed, and they walked outside. Lucy liked walking next to the strong and handsome Archie. Of course, she had no feelings for him, just friends. But the guy didn't understand that. He perceived her behavior as if she was flirting with him, and she'd agreed to go out. "Archie, why?" He brought her a huge bouquet of flowers. "I just like to make you feel good." He hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. In her letters to John, Lucy never said a word about being in a relationship. They also corresponded, confessed their love to each other. Lucy wrote that she was waiting for him. And the new friend kept coming, bringing gifts, flowers, inviting her on dates, which Lucy took for simple meetings. "Are you ready?" He came for her again. Yes, she came out to him. It was already warm outside, so it was possible to spend time somewhere in a summer cafe. "Lucy, I care about you." The young man took her hand. "Archie, why, you know everything." She lowered her eyes and took his hand away. "Perhaps your love with John is all far-fetched," he told her. "That's enough. I'm going home." She still wouldn't look him in the eye. "Okay, think about it." It turned out that they spent the summer together, and in September, they started to meet again in the city where they studied. "We should celebrate our new year of study," Juliet insisted. "I don't mind," Archie said immediately. They got together again at the guy's apartment. Wine, talking, laughing, dancing. Archie went to see Lucy off. As they walked past the park, he put his arm around her. "What are you doing?" She pulled his arm away. "Lucy, stop breaking down." He was very drunk. "Archie, stop it. I trust you as a friend. And you," she walked faster. "What about me?" The guy caught up with her and grabbed her arm. "Nothing." She was trying to get away. "Wait, why did you let me do all that then?" He shouted in her face. "What did I let you do?" She really didn't understand. Taking gifts, going on dates, what? It was all for nothing. He couldn't calm down. "Stop it. Let me go." She ripped my arm out and ran. "No, I'm not letting you go that easily." He pushed her. "Please, you've been so good," she cried. "It's over." He pulled up her skirt. "Bastard," she spat in his face. The guy stopped. The spit seemed to sober him up. He sat down on the pavement. At that moment, Lucy jumped to her feet and ran as fast as she could to the dormitory. "Lucy, what happened?" The janitor shouted to her. She saw that the girl's hair was disheveled and her sweater was torn, but she had already run away without answering her question. Archie didn't show up for a few days, probably because he was ashamed and Lucy didn't want to see him. The girl did not tell anyone anything, just stopped gathering company. "Why weren't you with us yesterday?" Julia asked her. "Just did not want to, try to look natural, girl." "Well, I see I'm not in the mood. I don't want to pester the neighbor." Archie showed up a week later. He called Lucy. She didn't want to go at first, but it was necessary to find out everything to the end. The girl came down to the watch. "Let's go for a walk," her boyfriend called her. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She remembered the last walk. "Why, I love you," he shouted so that everyone paid attention to them. "Enough, stop this concert. My husband is coming back any day now." She wanted to leave. "You'll be sorry," he began to threaten. "What can you do?" grinned the girl and went to her room. John wrote down the date he would be back. By this day, Lucy had arrived at her parents' house to meet her beloved husband with them. John got off the wagon all handsome. He walked up to his mother-in-law and wife. All together, they went home to celebrate the meeting. The fathers were not at the train station. They prepared everything at home. When everyone was assembled, the questioning began. And the next day, the guy and the girl went to the city. There they again rented an apartment. The guy wanted to enter at least a college, to have at least some education. "How glad I am that we are together again," she hugged her lover. "Thank you for waiting." He pressed her against him. For a week, everything was very good in the couple. On Monday, Lucy went to study. She had no premonitions. She sat out her classes. After that, she went to the store, bought groceries, and hurried home. "Selena, I'm home," she shouted as she entered the apartment. She didn't hear a response. She walked into the room. The guy wasn't there and neither were his things. Lucy stood confused. She didn't understand what had happened. "Please pick up the phone." She stood with the phone in her hands. Her husband was unavailable. She threw the phone on the bed. She herself buried herself in her pillow and started to cry. He couldn't go anywhere, only to his mom. The girl got out of bed, began to pack. Not a few hours later, she was in her hometown. "Mom, did John come by?" she asked from the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" A woman came out to her. "Answer me." Lucy was waiting. "No, what happened?" Her mother was curious. "I'll tell you later." "I don't know yet." She went to her mother-in-law's. "Aunt Selena," she knocked on the door. "What do you want?" John opened it. "Please, love, explain what's going on." She wanted to hug him, but he pulled her arms away. "Lucy, we're breaking up." He was very serious. "What? Why?" She sat down on the poof in the hallway, covered her face with her hands and cried. "Here, this is not enough for you." He did not explain anything to her, threw an envelope in front of the girl. Lucy took the envelope, opened it. There was a letter and many pictures. The paper stated that she had been dating a certain Archie for a year. He gave her flowers, gifts, went out, kissed her. Attached to all this were photographs. One of her sitting on Vladimir's lap, another of him giving her flowers. Lucy threw it all on the floor. She cried even more, realized that the classmates so decided to get back at her. "Selena, I'm sorry, but we had nothing." She approached her husband. "Don't call me that." It was obvious he had no intention of communicating. "I swear to you. Yes, we dated, we went out, but it never went any further than that." She was silent, remembering the night Archie had almost committed a terrible act. "Why didn't you write to me about it? He's a friend of ours. I would have said you were in the same company, but you didn't. Why?" He didn't look at her. "I don't know. I didn't want to upset you. I don't need anyone else but you." She sat down next to him. "No, I can't forgive that." The boy put his head down on his hands. But why? She was getting hysterical. "It's a betrayal," he said quietly. "John, I understood everything. I realized I only need you." She stood up, came up behind him and hugged him. "Lucy, don't. He hasn't done anything. He's a scoundrel because I didn't go with him. He did that so you and I would break up." Lucy didn't want to tell him about that situation. "I don't care which one of you." "Which one?" He got up and went into the hallway. The pictures were still lying there. I'm not leaving until you forgive me, Lucy said. Well, you can settle down. You've been here a million times. You know what's where. The guy started to put on his shoes. And you. The girl cried again. And I need to think it over. He walked out and slammed the door. Not 15 minutes later, the door opened and Selena walked in. She saw the girl, the mess in the hallway, came up to her. What happened here? The mother-in-law asked. John left, slumped down in Lucy's chair. After that, they called Betty. She came over. Lucy told them everything. Yes, I know that she was in touch with this Archie. They even came to visit together, was surprised by the mother that her husband did not believe her daughter. Look what he sent him, showed the girl the pictures, chose the most provocative ones. The women read and looked at everything. So, now I'll call him. Selena got up and started dialing her son's number. What's he saying? Betty looked at her. Lucy, go home. He said he'll think about it. He'll come and talk to you. Selena spoke quietly and stroked her daughter-in-law's back. Do you promise? She raised her eyes to her. Yes, she kissed the top of her head. Lucy packed up and walked to the train station. She sat in the apartment again and suffered. How she wanted to find Archie now and tell him everything. But she knew how mean he was, so she didn't want to make things worse. The next day she was back at school. Every time she came home she hoped John had arrived, but he hadn't. Hi, he came after a month. John, she wanted to throw herself at him but didn't. She thought she would push him away. I came to talk to him. He came into the apartment. And that was it? Lucy felt like she was going to cry again. Let's see. He walked over and sat down on the couch. Ask me, I'll tell you everything. She sat down next to him. Tell me everything as it happened, her husband asked. And Lucy told for about an hour how it all began and how it ended. The only thing she missed was the story in the park. Why didn't you tell him you thought of him as a friend? The young man couldn't understand. How could I realize that he doesn't know it himself? She reflected. Yeah, you still have a lot of learning to do, he smirked. John, I swear to you that, between us, nothing happened. She moved closer to him. I believe you. He reached out and hugged her. Really? She snuggled in. I went out with him. He couldn't really say anything. And at the end, he admitted he was doing it out of spite, just like you said. John leaned over and started kissing his wife. Lucy was glad that she and her husband were doing well. Now every morning she prepared his breakfast, went to study, and in the evening they had Jacoptic meetings. John went to school, at the same time went to work in the police. Lucy rejoiced in her husband's success. Darling, guess what? She was holding a small box. I don't know. He took the gift from her hands. Open it. She stood there without breathing. The young man opened the lid, looked first inside and then at Lucy. Is this what I think it is? He didn't want to get excited ahead of time. Yes, she clapped her hands together. Inside the box was a 2-strike pregnancy test and a pacifier. We love it. He stood up and hugged her. Afterwards, the young people informed the future grandmothers about everything. The latter were, of course, delighted. John continued to work. Lucy had only a few months to finish her studies. After that, she was not going to get a job anywhere because she would start her maternity leave. Wait, her husband pulled away from her. His phone was ringing. Okay, she went into the kitchen. Honey, I'm being paged. He's leaning over her from behind. What? It's your day off, she got upset. Yeah, but some thugs robbed the cash register in one of the villages. They were spotted and now they're inside shooting back. He was fully dressed. Be careful, his wife kissed him. He walked out of the apartment. Lucy herself doesn't know why, but she crossed him. She had never done that before. Lucy, the phone rang in the night. Yes, she didn't understand anything when she woke up. You can come to the hospital. John is hurt, a male voice told her calmly. Not understanding, she sat up in bed. Come, a silence formed on the other end. She didn't realize what she was doing. Rushed to the hospital. What? She expected to be led to John now. Those scumbags were shooting buckshot. He's been hit. He's unconscious now. Muttered what was probably a co-worker. Can I see him? Lucy asked. I don't know. He looked around, looking for a doctor. The girl was thrashing around the corridor. She couldn't gather herself. When the doctor came to them, he explained that the wound was serious. The shot could go in different directions. Lucy started calling her and John's parents. By morning, everyone was gathered. Selena was crying. No one was bothering her. For 3 long days, women and men took turns being on duty at the hospital, and on the morning of the 4th day, John died without regaining consciousness. "Daughter," her mother called her. "No," she screamed into the phone. "Hold on." Her mother tried to find words of encouragement, but nothing worked. "I'm coming." Lucy wanted to get out of her seat and run to them. "No, you don't have to. We'll be right there." Betty stopped her. Everyone was saddened by this sad event. They just sat there in silence. Lucy was staring at one point on the wall. She couldn't even move. "Daughter, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Your husband was a hero." Carlos sat down next to her. "I know." Her voice was lifeless. The day of the funeral, Lucy went crazy. Nothing could stop her. She screamed like a wounded animal. And when no one was home, she even tried to kill herself. But her mother came back in time. "Daughter, what are you doing? You have to live. You will have a child." She grabbed her and held her for so long until she stopped kicking. "Mom, I can't do without him. He's my life, my love," the girl screamed. "Everything will be fine. Remember that you'll have a little one soon. Then your brains will fall into place." That's how Harry caught them when he got back to the apartment. What? He didn't finish, he realized. The procession was very slow. So many people had gathered: colleagues, acquaintances, friends, relatives. They were really burying him like a hero. And only Lucy and Selena sat on the bench because they could not believe that their boy and husband were no longer in this world. "I will always be with you." Lucy rushed to the grave. Her father managed to grab her in time. He was ready for it. When it was all over, she just fell on all those wreaths and flowers and sobbed in her voice. "What can I do to help her?" Betty looked at her husband. But at that moment, the girl was writhing in pain, and her mother noticed it and came running over. "She's bleeding," the woman noticed. "Hurry up and call an ambulance." The car arrived. The girl looked like a mad woman. The paramedics had to deal with her. When everyone arrived at the hospital, it was clear that nothing good to expect. And so it was. The doctor came out and told the family that the girl's baby was gone. Why did this happen to her, to our girl?" cried Beatty. The father was also somber. "The girl is under sedation now, but in the evening you can pick her up," mumbled the doctor. "Okay." Beatty looked at her friends. "Unequivocally, we are taking her with us," said Harry. When her parents arrived in the evening, Lucy wasn't herself. She seemed to exist, but really everything inside felt like it had been scorched. When she arrived at her parents' house, all she did was lock herself in her room and sit there, tears flowing all by themselves. "Daughter, you have to come to your senses," Selena told her. "I understand that, but everything died inside me." Looked at her with colorless eyes. "Daughter, well, tell me, what do you see as a way out of this situation?" The mother was ready to do anything to help her girl. "I was thinking, maybe I should go somewhere. I will be distracted by my work. I will forget." Lucy turned away to the window. "Of course, if it will make you feel better, then please," she went on all the girls' terms. Already the next day, Lucy began to pack. Her friend had long ago suggested that she go to work on a shift. And now she was finally right for it. "Julia, is your offer still valid?" Lucy called her. "Yes, of course. We're always in need of hands," she said happily. "Then meet me in a couple of days and I'll call you," Lucy decided. She sat at the table with her relatives. It was not as cheerful as it had always been. Selena supported her choice. She continued to socialize with Betty. Lucy slept very badly that night. She was plagued by nightmares. She dreamed of a girl who was reaching out to her and asking her not to leave. In the morning, the girl woke up in a cold sweat. Lucy left. She sat on the train, looking out the window, and thought about nothing. At the station, she was met by Julia. The friends hugged. While driving to the place, the girl told everything that happened. She could only sympathize. "Well, here we are." They got out near some building. Now Lucy had to live in the dormitory again. And again her roommate was Julia. "Just like back at school," she smiled. Yes, Lucy shook her head. In the morning they went to work. The new girl had to learn everything. They had to work in the dining hall, washing dishes, floors, walls, and everything else. Sometimes she'd be asked to serve. It was understandable. "Well, do you agree?" Her neighbor looked at her. Yes, I have no choice. Lucy was ready for anything. The work was hard at first. When she got involved in the process, there was no time left at all. From the very morning until late in the evening, the girl was in the kitchen. She came home and just fell off her feet. But after she realized everything, she grew to working time. Now she could have tea with the girls and go out in the evening. Let's go. There is a place where everyone gathers to spend leisure time. Julia called her when it had been a few weeks. Okay, Lucy wanted to go out. They packed up and set off on their adventure. Lucy knew that with Julia she was sure to find them. Oh, what beauties! They hadn't gotten anywhere yet and they had already been spotted. Two young men stopped to meet the girls. Hi, Julia said to them. What do you plan to do? The young men were curious. We haven't decided yet, the neighbor said honestly, and it was true. Come on, you can help brighten up our boring evening, they called the girls. Lucy said nothing, watching. They came to the local cafe, which was very small, but there were so many people here that it was strange how everyone got in. So here's to the meeting. The young men were fun. Let's get acquainted. The first thing Lucy said pleased everyone. That's right, the people in the room caught on. I'm Steve, and this is my friend Austin, now spoke the one who before that was also more silent. Lucy sat sad. She didn't want anything. Then Steve called her outside. Do you want to go for a walk? He was already giving her his hand. Okay, they went. The town was small. They came to a house. Would you like to come in? The new acquaintance asked. Why not? Lucy didn't care. They went into the place where Steve had rented a place. It was obvious that he was not alone. Wine? He pulled a bottle out of the cupboard. Come on, the girl agreed to everything. When the bottle was emptied, Lucy sat looking at the young man. Come to me. He held out his arms to her. She stood up and walked over, dizzy. It felt good because all thoughts had gone somewhere. Steve sat her on his lap and started kissing her. The girl liked it. She gave in to his caresses. She was staying with him that night. Wake up. You have to go to work. Steve woke her up in the morning. Her head hurt. It felt like it was going to fall apart. Yes, thank you. Lucy was embarrassed because she found 3 other males in the room. I'll come back tonight, the young man promised, but Lucy never met him again. What, are you waiting for him? Asked Julia. How is it that in such a small town, we have not met for several weeks? Did not understand the girl. They can come for a one-time job, pull a heating main or an electrician, and go to the next object, explained the neighbor. I see. Lucy looked at her hands, which had become rough from the detergents. They continued to get out with her friend. Lucy had already gotten into the work. In the 6 months she had been working here, she had not given up wine and men. Lucy, you weren't like this. What happened to you? Julia asked her. My problems. She didn't want to justify herself to anyone. Her mother called every day. Lucy sent her money and lied that there was a lot of work and she couldn't come home. Betty believed her, so she didn't say anything. And the girl went on with her life. Julia, are you coming today or not? She called her friend. Wait, she had a headache, so she couldn't get out of bed. Okay, I'll go then, slammed the girl's door. It wasn't often that they had time to go out, so she didn't want to waste it. That evening she met Sasha. He was so handsome and also brutal, it seemed to Lucy. They took a long walk, talked, and then went to visit him. He lived alone. That was good. Lucy and Alexander spent the night together. In the morning, Lucy went to her place. She no longer expected to meet the man, but he came the next day. You? The girl was surprised then. Why such a surprise? He did not understand. Simply, she was ashamed to admit it. Are you coming? He waited for an answer. Yes, this insolence and something else like Lucy in this man. Once again, they were at Alexander's house. Everything was going well. He was doing a lot for the girl. Julia, he asked me to live with him, Lucy told her friend in the evening. And you? She tensed up. Why, I'll probably agree. The girl was glad. He is some kind of murky, did not believe Alexander neighbor. You just don't know him. That's the first impression. Lucy was sure of it. It's up to you to decide. Her friend pressed her lips together. She didn't like it. Okay, don't be offended. She hugged and kissed her neighbor, took her suitcase and left the room. From that moment, Alexander and Lucy formed a couple. They went everywhere together. Everything was fine. When the girl began to live together with Alexander, She began to notice that he was doing something illegal in addition to working here. One day, she decided to ask, but she was answered so rudely that she didn't even think about it anymore. "Why are your eyes red?" Julia noticed at work. "Don't mind her," Lucy turned away from her. "I see, she's hitting you," her friend guessed. No, she was telling the truth. It's just that she cried all night after a big scolding. "Okay, tell me if anything," continued the girl. With Sasha was difficult, but Lucy swallowed everything. After all, stability. She noticed that different people came to him. They talk about something, do something. But the girl didn't dare to ask about it anymore. "Lucy, aren't you going home at all?" Her mother asked her when she called. "Mommy, of course I'm going, but not now, a little later." She couldn't explain anything to the woman. "Who called you?" Alexander came up to her. "Mommy," she showed her phone. "I can also write Mom and Angelica will call me," he spoke in a stern voice. "Are you jealous?" She laughed. It was the first time he had ever hit her. Lucy stood, holding her cheek, and looked at Alexander. No one had ever touched her in her life until that moment. "If you misbehave, you'll get another," he promised her. Why? She didn't deserve to be treated like that. "You asked me how many men you've had in all the time you've lived here, and now all they say is that I picked up the poor guy. If I'd known before, I never would have done such a thing." He clenched his fists. "That was before you," she thought. She was acting roughly now. That was it. The conversation was over. The man just walked out of the apartment. Lucy wanted to leave, but she was afraid. There was no one to complain to either. When she got to work the next day, she decided to share with her friend. Can you imagine the look on her face when she told her everything? "Report it," Julia advised her. "I'm scared," Lucy admitted honestly. "Do you want me to report it?" she suggested. "Try, but if he finds out, we'll be in trouble," her friend told her. "Don't worry, we've been in more trouble than this," she promised her. Lucy returned home. She was really afraid of her roommate, but she had nothing to do but wait. A week passed. Alexander came home. "Did you snitch?" He came up to Lucy and grabbed her by the chest. "What are you talking about?" She made big eyes. "You know what?" He gathered some things, then put a chair in the middle of the room and sat the girl down. "What are you doing?" She was shaking, scared. "You'll find out now," he grinned. Alexander tied her to the chair. He doused everything with a smelly liquid for fear. Lucy did not even immediately realize that it was gasoline. He took one more look at her. He flicked a match, threw it on, and closed the doors. "Help!" She began to scream with all her might. At that moment came the realization that she was not living right, but no one heard the girl. The house was old and wooden. The logs were quickly seized by the fire. Someone called the fire department. Lucy was panting. She rocked harder on the chair. She fell down. It was easier here. But she realized she was losing consciousness. When she was at her wit's end, she felt someone lift her off the floor. "Lucy!" She opened her eyes. Julia was sitting next to her. "Where is he?" The girl's first question was. "Don't worry, he's right where he needs to be," her friend reassured her. "Well and good." Lucy closed her eyes. "Imagine, you were right. He was doing all sorts of nonsense to destroy everything. Everything, and set it on fire so they wouldn't find it." Julia started whispering. "Yeah, and me for one," the girl cried. "All's well that ends well." The neighbor squeezed her hand. "What did the doctor say?" Lucy wanted to know. "Nothing happened to you, just smoke inhalation," the neighbor reassured her. "I want to go home so badly." The girl was still crying. "Everything will be all right," Julia nodded her head. Lucy was discharged. She immediately wrote a statement and went home. Now on the train, the girl sat. She understood everything and realized that she had been bad. How could she have let John down like that? What had happened to her? "Mom," she walked into the apartment. The prodigal daughter had finally returned. Her father came out to meet her. "Where's Mom?" She came up and hugged Dad. "She will come now, in the store," he replied. It was nice and cozy at home. Lucy went to her room. Everything was so nice here. "Lucy?" Mommy asked from the hallway. Mom ran to her girl. "Hello, dear," hugged her. They went into the kitchen. The woman put the kettle on and then began to assemble the table. "What a fool I was," Lucy said, looking at her mother. Don't talk bad. You were stressed. You felt bad. The woman reassured her. Yes, everything can be. Her daughter agreed with her. Lucy decided to exhale a little and then start her life over again. She looked for job vacancies. Not 2 weeks later, she was invited to work. Where was it this time? Betty was sitting there knitting something. Where I went to school, her daughter confessed. Alone? The mother looked down. For now, she went over and hugged her favorite people. Good. Her mother agreed with her again. Lucy took out the diploma she had once received, packed her things and left. She had rented an apartment on the phone. Now all she had to do was pay for it. She got the job. It was easy for Lucy. Lucy had done the right thing. Now she was working in the local hospital department as a nurse, but she liked it. Lucy, would you like to take another job? Her boss asked her. I'll have to think about it. She was just about to go home. She walked down the street and realized that there was never any extra money. Hello. Lucy entered the chief's office. Greetings. Have you made your decision? He asked her. Yes, I have. She smiled at him. Then write your application and you can start work. He handed her a blank sheet of paper. Lucy realized that it would be very hard, but the money would come. She wrote everything and left the office. In the evening, she was at home, sitting and thinking about what would happen next in her life. Lucy, you will pull all the veins out of yourself, Elizabeth told her. They met in the hospital. Now they began to communicate closely. What can I do? No one can help me, she said. Do you even have a rest? Her friend asked her. When? Lucy smiled at her. I see, let's go out. Elizabeth suggested it. It was rare, but the girl thought that after the day shift, in the evening you can relax. And indeed, with Elizabeth, they could go to a cafe or restaurant, spend a pleasant time there, relax. Oh, it's so good that you're taking me out. Lucy leaned back in her chair. What else do girlfriends do? She didn't understand. In this place, they liked most of all pleasant music, good cuisine, friendly staff. Girl, can I ask you to dance? A man approached Lucy. Of course, she looked at her friend and gave her hand. Anthony, he introduced himself as they walked to the center. Lucy, it had been a long time since she had danced with anyone or socialized with the opposite sex. You're a good dancer, he said. You too, she didn't know what to say. It was nice, thank you, he said at the end as he walked her back to her seat. Well, what's going on there? Did you get to know each other? Elizabeth started asking at once. Yes, Lucy's face blushed a little. And what then? She waited. Nothing. Thank you for the dance, you heard yourself. The girl raised her glass. But she was wrong. When they were about to go home, Anthony came up to them. Can I walk such beautiful ladies home? He walked in the middle. Of course, smiled Elizabeth. She lived with the man, now taking care of her friend. They walked. There was a casual conversation. Elizabeth saw her boyfriend ahead, said goodbye and ran to him. Where do you live? Anthony asked. Why are you calling me? I look so old, she asked him. Sorry, he was embarrassed. They walked on. There's my house. They walked up to the driveway. Can we exchange phone numbers? He tried. Yes, Lucy agreed. Anthony was a nice man. She walked home, feeling as if flowers were blooming on her soul. Anthony called the next day. Although Lucy was very busy, she took a moment to talk to him. He offered to meet, but she couldn't today. It was the night shift. All I can suggest is that tonight you come here. I'll be out, she muttered. Okay, that would be fine with me for starters. She could hear how pleased he was. Lucy didn't know if he would come or not, but she hoped he would. And he came, and not just for no reason, but with flowers. God, it's been 1,000 years since anyone gave me flowers. She took the bouquet and smelled it. It makes me feel good to do this, he smiled. From that day on, Anthony and Lucy started dating. When it was a day off, they would go to the park or just sit in the yard. The rest of the days, as it worked out. Why do you live in a rented apartment? Move in with me, he suggested to her after 6 months of meetings. Would that be convenient? She was afraid. She'd already trusted him once. What are you saying? Of course it would be convenient, he laughed. I'll have to think about it, Lucy smiled. Of course, he understood that. Okay, I agree. Lucy thought to herself that she'd have found a real man. They started living together. Anthony was flying on wings. Why don't you have a rug in your house? Lucy asked him one day. I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. He looked at the floor, which was covered with linoleum. We should get some, she concluded. Suit yourself, he said, but he didn't offer to give money. Okay, Lucy isn't proud. She has enough. She'll do it all herself. In 6 months, she bought 2 carpets, bedding, a kitchen set, which was assembled by specially hired people. Could you do it yourself? The woman was surprised when she came home from work. You see, the hands do not grow from there. He waved his hands. After that, it was his turn to buy a bed, and then a large closet for clothes. Why are you doing this? Elizabeth asked her when Lucy was telling her. Why, I lived there too. I wanted to be comfortable. Lucy did not understand the question. Oh, you live like this with men, you invest in them, and then they leave you, Elizabeth sighed. At that moment, Lucy remembered Alexander, shrugged. No, Anthony is not like that. Elizabeth, can you lend me a couple thousand? I saw such a nice shirt. I wanted to buy Anthony, she asked her friend. What, you also dress him? She was amazed. What's the big deal? Lucy was amazed again. Did he buy you anything besides that broom on the first date? No, Lucy thought. Well, you're ready to try. All in your Anthony. He only did what he did to bring you to his place. She marveled at the woman's naivety. Come on, he does so much for me, Lucy said. Oh, you'll be on his side no matter what you say. She wouldn't lend money to her friend. Fine, I'll borrow it somewhere else, she said. She liked to come home, cook for her lover, and then lie in a warm bed. We're having guests over today, Anthony said. Good, it's the day shift. She came over and kissed him. Are you gonna get everything ready? He looked expectant. When I'll be at work all day, let's order in. She hoped Anthony would agree. Okay, just do it yourself. I don't have time, he went out. Elizabeth, would you like to join us today? She asked when she got to the service. What's the occasion? She was curious. Nothing. Just Anthony invited some friends and I thought I'd invite you. She was scrubbing the floors and talking at the same time. Well, we'll be there tonight. My friend didn't mind. Lucy, as promised Anthony, ordered everything. She paid for the order. All that was left was to receive it at home. In the evening, she saw that many strangers had come. They were her husband's co-workers. As long as everyone was sitting at the table, talking and eating, everything was fine. But at some point, Lucy realized that the guests had had too much to drink. We should dance, Anthony said. Okay, one of the girls got up and turned up the volume. Won't the neighbors fight? Elizabeth asked Lucy. No, they are normal. The woman was sure of it. She went to the kitchen to get more snacks. Look, when she came back, her friend pointed with her eyes to a couple dancing. It was Anthony and that girl dancing. Fine, let them relax. Lucy waved them off. Yeah, if someone danced with Barry like that, I'd kill them. Elizabeth followed her friend. They sat down at the table, but Lucy couldn't help but stare at what her man was doing. They were wriggling so much, he touched the girl on every bulging spot she had. That's enough. She got up from the table and turned the sound down. What's the matter? The ones who were just bouncing on the carpet stopped. What are you doing here? She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't help it. Okay, what are you yelling about? Anthony said, and they giggled with the girl. And you still believe him? Asked Elizabeth as she put her coat on in the hallway. Stop it, Lucy interrupted her. Okay, your life, but I suggest you take a closer look, her friend warned her. Lucy returned to the room and the couple stood again, already without music, moving slowly. She saw Anthony hugging her as if he wanted to take her immediately. She got disgusted, turned away and left. She cried in the kitchen. All the guests had left, only this girl was left. Elizabeth was in pain. She started washing dishes to distract herself. She heard the front door slam, thought it was the girl leaving. Anthony? She went into the room, but there was no one there. She'd done so much for this union and he'd do this to her. She cleaned up, made the bed, and went to bed. He came in the morning, smelling someone else's perfume in the bed. Did you like it? Lucy turned to him. What? He wasn't quite sober yet. The broad, Lucy explained. Are you jealous? He chuckled. No, the girl lied. Well, sleep then. He turned on his side and sniffled. How to live after that? She just didn't sleep until morning. Hi, she said hello to everyone when she got to work. Why do you look so bad? Elizabeth whispered to her. Not sleeping well, Lucy didn't feel like sharing her thoughts with anyone. I see, I've made a mess of things, her friend guessed. What should I do? The girl almost burst into tears in response. In the first place, leave one position, all the money you cannot earn, and you are not like a man, advised Elizabeth. I've already thought about it, she nodded. Today, she went and wrote a statement. If Anthony was making a decent income, she would quit. She was so fed up. As the years went by, Lucy continued to live with the same Anthony. They were satisfied with their mutual neighborliness. There was no love lost between them. He went out without even hiding it. What's wrong with me? She asked him one day. What kind of questions? The man looked at her surprised. Just leave it. She didn't want to continue the conversation. If he didn't understand, she didn't have to. Lucy, you need another man, Elizabeth said. You look at me. Who will look at me? Self-critically answered her friend. You want to talk about yourself. You are still beautiful. Just a long time ago did not take care of themselves. The girl encouraged her as she could. I did everything for him, and he is so, cried Lucy. Everything. Do not regret anything. You still have everything ahead of you. Elizabeth hugged her. They continued to work. Lucy wondered why she had given up the night shifts. She didn't want to go home, but there was nothing to do, and she again went to an empty apartment where everything was well done. She was cooking dinner, and the man did not want to return there. Where have you been? She felt his cold body at night under the blanket. That's it. Go back to sleep. He didn't turn to her. Tears choked. That night she decided everything. She went to work in the morning, spent half a day there, took a day off. She came home, packed her things. She couldn't stop the tears. At first I wanted to write a note, but in the end I decided not to. She stopped, circled the nest she herself had made with a glance, turned around and left. Hello, she came to Elizabeth. They had agreed that her friend would stay here for a couple of days. Come in quickly. She didn't want to keep her guest on the doorstep for long. They sat for a while, cooked dinner, ate, and went to bed. Lucy did not want to disturb the couple, so she stayed out of the room until nightfall. Lucy, go to the 8th room. A man needs help there, the head nurse asked her. She put a basin of clean towels on the table. She entered the room. He was lying on the bed. She did not understand whether the man was asleep or unconscious. Quietly, she approached the bed, checked the IV. Everything was normal there. Then she began to remove absorbent cotton, syringes, and other things from the bedside table. Drink, she heard, and she was scared. Now she took a mug that was standing there, dipped the cotton swab and moistened his lips. He licked greedily. More, he asked. Yep, she repeated her movements. He wrinkled his nose and opened his eyes. The whites were red. The young man looked at Lucy. She blushed for some reason. He reminded her of John. She came over and sat on the edge of the bed, though it was not customary. If you could say so. He could hardly even speak, but he tried to smile. Soon you'll get better and you'll be as good as new, Lucy reassured the young man. Your words would be. He began to cough. The girl quickly approached. You don't have to talk much. She lifted his head to make him stop. Elizabeth, have you seen the patient from the 8th? She asked her friend in the corridor. No, why? She turned and looked at her in surprise. I don't know, but when I saw him, something inside clicked, Lucy admitted. That's a good sign, Elizabeth laughed. She decided to find out a little about who was in their facility. She asked this one, that one, the other one, the third one, and gathered a lot of information and gossip. Already in the evening, when they came home, Elizabeth called Lucy into the kitchen. They needed to talk. What are you suddenly in the middle of the week? The girl looked at the bottle of wine that stood on the table. We need to talk about something, Elizabeth said cryptically. Okay, Lucy took the glasses and poured ruby liquid into them. Listen, your new acquaintance is not simple. The hostess cut the cheese. I don't even know his name. Only later I realized that I could look it up in the medical records. She blushed again. I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people say about him that he doesn't do the right things. Elizabeth lowered her voice. What kind of things? Lucy asked in a whisper, leaning over the table. Both laughed afterward. No one was home and they were vociferating. I do not know, said her friend seriously, but he is not in our hospital because he fell down the stairs. Why are you telling me all this? I'm not going to do anything. Lucy took a sip of wine. Yeah, I can see you sitting there, blushing and turning white. The girl smiled. Well, enough. Time will tell, you know. He reminded me something of my first husband. Immediately became sad eyes. Then I see Elizabeth guessed why everything is so. They sat until the husband of the friend came. Then they fed Sergey dinner, talked, and went to their rooms. In the morning, Lucy got up. Her mood was very good. For the first time in a long time, she sat in front of the mirror, made her hairstyle, made up her eyes. When she stepped out into the hallway, Elizabeth gasped. Lucy, you're so? She stopped talking. Like what? She smiled. I don't know, gentle, beautiful. They left the house and headed to their work. Lucy didn't wait to be asked or forced to go to room number 8. She went there herself. The first thing she did today was look at the medical history. She took it and looked at it like she was looking at what the patient had been prescribed. She read that his name was Jacob. She glanced out the window and said the name to herself again. What are you hanging out there? He's been looking at her for a few minutes now. I see you're feeling better, she said sarcastically. Give me a drink, he said sharply, and because his voice was hoarse, it seemed to be rude. Now, a little offended Lucy, she went to the nightstand and gave him a glass of water. Thanks, Sardi. He handed her back the empty glass. It's okay, she headed for the exit. Sit with me, the young man said in a different tone. What? She stopped at the door. Lucy heard everything, but she wished he would ask again. Stay with me, he didn't refuse her. Okay, she smiled, but when she turned to him, she was completely serious. Lucy walked over to the bed, pulled up a chair and sat down on it. Tell me about yourself. He lay on his back and looked up at the ceiling. My name is Lucy. I work here. She shrugged because she didn't know what to say next. Husband, kids? He turned his head slightly in her direction. Just like that, her cheeks began to blush again. Why, are there any secrets? He grinned and then grimaced. No, Lucy was confused. I'm just kidding. My name is Jacob, and I'm not really into anything, so I came to you for a while, he said. Nice to meet you. The girl was embarrassed. It was obvious that he was getting better because he was already joking and talking a lot. That's what the girl told the doctor when she left the room. She could not wait to meet Elizabeth and tell her everything that had happened, but they didn't meet until the evening when they went home. Look, I promised I'd stay with you for a couple days, but it just so happens that I wasn't even looking for anything. Lucy looked at her friend. You what? Do not even think about it. Live as long as you want. You do not embarrass us, sincerely said Elizabeth. And we made friends today, bragged Lucy to her. With whom? She didn't understand because she was quick to change the subject. Jacob, Lucy laughed. Jacob who? She still couldn't understand. What Jacob could Jacob be like? The sick one from 8th grade? Lucy laughed, offended because that was all she could think about. Oh, that's what you mean. Elizabeth laughed at the fact that she hadn't realized it for so long. Yes, he told me about himself. I did the same and all. We are already friends. She recalled how it was. Actually, you can't flirt with patients. Elizabeth wagged her finger. I know, and I don't flirt. The girls were in high spirits. At home, it was business as usual. Lucy couldn't wait to go to bed. She wanted it to be morning already, and she wanted to be by his side. She was going to work alone today. She told Elizabeth that she would get out early to go to the store. No one had come to see the young man in 2 days, so she decided to make him happy with something. Lucy bought some fruit and juice and headed for the hospital. Here I am, she slipped into the room. Hey, he was already half sitting up on the pillows. Look what I brought you. She started to put everything she bought on the nightstand. And why? He looked at it all. To make you happy. She didn't understand his mood today. Okay, he smiled at her, just like last time. After that, they ate oranges, talked and laughed. It's all you was the only thing he kept saying. After that, Lucy started giving Jacob massages. Several times each day she went up to him for it. He would yell, but she ignored it. They were getting up, taking their first steps. In 6 months, Jacob was standing on his own feet. He looked at the girl with great love and gratitude. Would you be my wife? He asked her at breakfast. Do you honestly want that? She couldn't believe she was sitting here with him, as if all those years she'd spent in a bad relationship hadn't happened. What are you talking about? Of course you do. You are the kindest and most loyal girl. He got up from his seat and, leaning on his cane, walked over to her. Yes, I want to be your wife, she blushed. Then you will soon have the best wedding ever. He went to the seat. They were no longer in their 20s, but much more, but they were both young at heart. At the wedding were invited parents. Did not forget Lucy and Selena and her husband, who were happy for her. In addition, the former mother-in-law confirmed that Jacob is very similar to John. The friends had a nice celebration. The bride and groom were happy. How are you doing with him? Is he good? Elizabeth asked her. Very good. You have no idea how caring he is, Lucy said and looked at her husband. Didn't it seem to you that he only needed you when it was bad? Her friend began to doubt again. Look, we've been through so much together. I don't think he proposed for nothing. Lucy didn't believe it. I wish it were so, Elizabeth even spat. The guests left and the young people were alone. Jacob wasn't quite well enough to do business again, so he spent a lot of time at home. So far, so good. But as he got stronger, he started to disappear from home. At first, he tried to come home every day, but it was not very convenient for him, so after a while Lucy slept alone. The girl had nothing to do. She called her friend Elizabeth. Oh, that again, you have nothing to do. She was upset for Lucy. No, everything is fine. Now he will catch up with what he missed while he was sick, and everything will fall back into place, defended her husband's wife. We'll see. Elizabeth didn't believe anything anymore. And indeed, Jacob, not 3 months later, was right at home. Lucy wondered very much what was wrong. Why are you always at home? What about your work? She wanted to know everything about the man she loved. Don't ask unnecessary questions. If I'm at home, it's necessary, he told her rudely. Lucy did not interfere. She remembered what had happened when she had interfered in the affairs of her roommate. She was pleased that they were always together, of course. Jacob didn't spend every minute with her the way his wife would have liked. Why can't I go to work? She asked her husband, bored at home. No, you won't, he said imperiously. Can I at least go to a friend to visit? She could not sit in 4 walls. No, I need you. He took her hand and sat her on his lap. That made Lucy melt. She didn't need anything else. After a short time at home, Jacob started leaving again. He could be gone for a week or more. Lucy was jealous, worried. Come and visit and we'll talk, Elizabeth urged her. And if her husband came back, she didn't want to upset him. Oh, so sit with your husband, she said, as if offended. Jacob never showed up. A day later, Lucy got a call from the hospital, her heart sinking. She pulled herself together in a minute and drove to her lover's house. He was bleeding internally. What had happened? No one would explain. Beloved, come to your senses. She sat beside his bed after the operation, but all she got in response was silence. Again, a couple weeks in hospital and then bed rest at home. Lucy was there for him. Porridge, broth, medication. She could stay up nights because Jacob wasn't feeling well. Okay, I've got errands to run. It's been a month since he got out of that hospital bed. Lucy disappeared into Jacob's room for most of her working hours. After a week, the doctor gave him permission to get up, but he couldn't do it himself, so Lucy helped him. She walked with him first around the room, then in the hallway as well. Jacob said nice things, thanked her. A month passed very quickly, and during that time the young people became friends and they said goodbye very warmly. Will we meet again? The girl didn't want to let him go. Of course, he promised and got into the car that came after him. Lucy was sad. She looked after the departing car and almost cried. How are you? Elizabeth came up behind her. Everything is fine, blinked the girl, and a tear fell treacherously on her cheek. Come on, her friend took her hand and led her back into the building. Lucy continued to stay with Elizabeth. After she told her to live as long as she wanted, she hadn't even thought about it. Now she realized she had to look for an apartment. What are you doing? You've been living for so long. You don't need to move out, began to persuade her Elizabeth when her friend told her about it. I don't know, I still feel uncomfortable. Lucy was telling the truth. It's fine, trust me. I would have told you right away, the girl assured her. Lucy waited for him, but he didn't come. It was a shame. A month passed, the second, and Roma was still not there. Enough waiting, her girlfriend pitied her. You know, I try to talk myself out of it, but I can't, Lucy told her then. Another month later, a car pulled up to the hospital. I need Lucy, A young guy ran in. Now, Elizabeth met him, went to look for her friend. Hello. The girl came out into the lobby. She was very surprised that someone was looking for her. I need you. He showed her the car. The girl's heart beat faster. She had really waited for him. She turned to her friend, who looked surprised at everything that was happening. Let's go, Lucy said confidently. They climbed into the parlor. The guy there said Jacob wasn't feeling well and he'd sent him here for her. Excitement set in. Let's go, the girl said confidently. They drove off. Elizabeth stood at the window and saw everything. She was worried about her friend because she did not say anything, where she went, where to look for her in case of emergency. What happened to him? Lucy worried in the car. You'll see, it was obvious that the guy was focused on the road. They arrived somewhere outside of town, there to a house that was surrounded by a fence. The girl got out of the car, waiting for the doors to open so she could get in. She was led into the house, escorted into a room. Jacob was in bed again. He was asleep. Hello, she said loudly to make him wake up. Lucy. He opened his eyes and mumbled her name. What happened to you? Why didn't you come? She walked over to his bed. He moaned. Now she looked at the medication that was lying here. She decided to give him a painkiller. Don't, asked the doctor. He shook his head. Where is he? She rushed to the door, stepping out into the hallway. There she was shown to a room with a man in it. Are you the doctor? She turned to him. Yes, is something wrong? He got up from his chair. He's in pain, she pointed to the wall. Now he came out of his and went into the room where Jacob was lying. He saw that one of the medicines had been set aside. I wanted to give it to him, but he wouldn't let me. He sent it to you, Lucy admitted. Do you have a medical degree? The doctor turned to her. Yes, I'm a nurse, she nodded. Good, you wanted to do the right thing. You have to trust. The last words were addressed to Jacob. Thank you, Lucy said quietly. She stayed to live in the house. She called Elizabeth, told her to write a statement for her. After that, she alerted the management and they went along with it. She sat by the bedside of a man she really liked. Lucy didn't know why she was willing to do anything for him. She gave him compresses, turned him over, gave him shots, IVs, whatever she had to do. Thank you. He took her hand and pulled her to him. Anyone would have done the same. She tried to say something because her heart was pounding. She was worried about being so close to him. No, he looked into her eyes and then pulled her close and kissed her. Lucy realized she loved this man. Let's try to get up. He'd been sitting up for a while now, but the bones were shattered. They'd been put back together piece by piece, so it wasn't a given that he'd be able to do anything. Probably couldn't, he doubted. But Lucy took his hands, one placed on her shoulders. The young man managed it. He stood by the bed for only a few seconds, then sat back down. There, she was breathing hard because it was a little hard. Be careful, his wife saw him off. She, as in other years, was alone in the house. There was a different kind of joy now. The husband had hired a housekeeper, whom Lucy liked to talk to. Naomi, still have time to do everything. Let's have lunch. She invited her assistant to the table. I can't do that, she made big eyes. What's the big deal? Lucy didn't understand. They sat down at the table, talked about a lot of things, mostly about life. Naomi told about her difficult fate. So Lucy opened up to this woman. Of course, it hadn't happened the first day they met. It had been a couple years since she'd been employed there. Jacob came home very rarely, and he and his wife practically stopped communicating. Lucy would rush to meet her lover when he showed up, but he'd say he was tired and wanted to go to bed. And in the morning, he'd disappear again. Jacob, I need to talk to you. Lucy told him seriously when their marriage was 8 years old. Can you do that? He even stopped. Don't you believe it? The woman was so fed up with everything. She was kind of married and kind of not. She wanted clarity. Tell me, he exhaled impatiently. What's going on with you and me? She asked him forehead to forehead. Nothing, he smirked. That smirk of his had attracted Lucy so much before, but now it pissed her off. Jacob, I'm your wife. I've been sitting here alone for years, and you won't let me go anywhere, she cried. And you remember who you were, where I got you out of, and all you can do is look after me. I've got another family, a kid. Yes, I'm married to you, but I'm fine there. You're just a backup. He said all this to her face and left the house. What? She stood there confused. Lucy went to her room, cried a lot. Naomi came over in the evening. She wanted to talk to someone, but the woman couldn't leave the room. Her heart was breaking into pieces. Strangely enough, Jacob came the next day. He went straight to Lucy's room. He sat down on a chair. What? She didn't understand. She'd had a sleepless night, so her head wasn't thinking straight. Who were you before? How did you try to organize your life? He waited. I don't understand, she thought to herself. How could he know all this? Don't talk to the servants, he guessed what she was thinking. Understandable, she looked down at the floor. It was embarrassing if Naomi also exaggerated everything. So, did you make free love? He leaned toward her. Jacob, she didn't want to talk about it. It was a long time ago and not true. Lucy wanted to forget it all like a bad dream. Jacob, what? He jumped to his feet. It was all long before she met you. She tried to speak calmly so as not to irritate the man. Yes, and being told that my wife is an easy woman, it feels good. He grabbed her arm. It hurts me. She started to get scared. Me too. He looked at her and breathed heavily. And what are you going to do now? She couldn't think of anything, only of that grip that clenched tighter and tighter. You don't need to know that. He shoved her so hard that she fell on the bed. Lucy cried, and he gave her a look as if he'd spat at her and walked out. In the evening, Lucy thought of nothing better than to get even. She was alone, pulled a bottle of hard liquor and pills from the bar. Everything was in front of her. Why would she want this life? Everything is wrong and everything is wrong. She's only ruining things for others, her parents, her friends, her men. She poured into a glass, poured in a handful of pills. When she drank the bitter medicine, she felt immediately dizzy. Lucy knew the effects would come quickly. As she was passing out, she saw the front door open. She remembered nothing else. Lucy, she heard, her consciousness was badly clouded. For the first few seconds, she didn't realize where she was or what had happened to her. But it all came. She squeezed her eyes shut, though she hadn't opened them yet. Why couldn't she even die properly? Thank God she woke up. Elizabeth was standing over her. Jacob was beside her. What's wrong with me? Lucy realized that she hadn't gone to the other world, but it couldn't be without a trace. It's okay. Her friend stroked her head. Nothing is good. Neither are the brains in your head. What? Afraid to take more so I can come and feel sorry. He spoke in a tone that made Elizabeth want to punch him in the face. I'm sorry I didn't. Lucy closed her eyes. The man left. The friends were left alone. Tell me the truth, Lucy cried. You have pinched some nerves in your face and also in your neck, but also in general. Your body is poisoned, said her friend. Lucy couldn't think about how she looked now. She was on her way to recovery. That's when she realized what she had done. When she wanted to get a glass of water, she couldn't do it. Her fingers wouldn't listen. She'd get out of bed, but after a while, she'd get tired. On top of that, my immune system was completely weakened. Let's go. Jacob entered the room when she was discharged home. She needs help, Elizabeth said. So help her, he said in a tone that demanded no objection. They left the hospital together, Elizabeth carrying her friend in a wheelchair. Afterward, Jacob put her in the car, and they drove off. At the house, Lucy saw young people, a guy and a girl. She wondered who it could be. They rent an apartment here, he explained. What about me? She wondered. It's okay. They'll be patient, and when they get ready to buy, we'll decide. It was agreed that the young people would try to live in the private sector, and if they liked it, they would buy the house. No one warned them that the landlady would be ill, but the owner assured them that she would not interfere with them. So they did. It was so cold in the room, but Lucy was too shy to ask anyone for anything. She pulled several blankets over herself. She went out to the kitchen, ate something. The young neighbors looked at her, tried to talk, but the woman didn't meet it. Lucy, can I help you? A girl came up to her when she was going to the kitchen again. You have your own life. I don't want to disturb you, she said. Would you like to go for a walk? You're always in the house? Maria asked her. If it's not too much trouble, help me get dressed. Lucy was ashamed, but she hadn't breathed fresh air in months. Of course, Maria did as she was asked. Lucy went out of the house, told the girl that she could handle it from there, and she promised to follow her in a few minutes. It was freezing, and it was cold to be outside for long. Lucy didn't want to be followed, so she presumptuously went into the back of the lot. There she sat for a while, and when she felt herself freezing, she got up and walked back. But the woman did not calculate her strength. She slipped and fell. It is not known how much time passed while Maria was looking for her. "What are you doing? You'll catch cold." Maria found her at last. "Thank you," cried Lucy. She lay in her room, tears running down her cheeks. Already during the night, Lucy had a fever. It was hard for her to breathe, but the woman didn't call anyone. She was ashamed that she had to ask strangers for help. "Lucy, how are you feeling?" Maria came into the room. "I'm fine," she wheezed. "What are you talking about? You have a fever." She went over and touched her head. An ambulance was called and the woman was rushed to the hospital. Bilateral pulmonary edema. They put her in the ward, and then there were several weeks of treatment. Lucy had a long time to recover from this condition. Maria and Elizabeth came to visit her. "Thank you," the woman cried. Her friend offered to call her mother, but Lucy was against it. It was not easy for her. "What are you saying? Anyone would do that." She recognized herself in Maria. When she felt better, she was allowed to go home. "Jacob, hello," Maria called him. "We agreed to buy the house from you." He arrived and saw his wife lying in bed. She had lost a lot of weight and her face was distorted. "I'll leave her here and file for divorce. Don't worry, she won't live longer than a year. But for that, I'll give you a discount." He looked at the future owners of the house. "How can you do that to a person?" Maria didn't understand. You do not know how she acted. He scheduled a meeting for tomorrow to draw up the documents and hand over the money. "How are you?" A girl came into the room in the evening. "Why did you agree to leave me here?" Lucy asked, while she thought, if it weren't for this, where would she go? She didn't want to be a burden on her mother's shoulders. "I talked to my father. He said he would help you in your treatment." Maria sat down next to the bed. She smelled of kindness. "What are you saying? I don't need anyone's help." Lucy made a face that made Maria laugh. "You do not need to know that. You are still very young. Everything will get better. And people like your husband, you just need to throw aside." Maria saw without any stories what kind of man he is. Lucy was grateful to the girl. She lay back and smiled to herself. Living so many years with a man under the same roof, he offered her money to buy things in the stores. Why did she always refuse? She should have taken it and saved. Now at least she would have a financial cushion. It's nothing. Maria looked after a woman her husband, Mickey, Lucy, didn't see often. But when she needed his help, he was there for her. "You become like a mother to me." The girl hugged her sometimes. "You grew up without her?" The woman guessed. "Yes, she left us when I was not even 3 years old." It seemed that Maria was going to cry. "Gone somewhere or not at all?" Lucy asked cautiously. "Not at all." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry." The woman squeezed her hand. "It's okay. I don't remember her at all." The girl wiped her tears and smiled again. Lucy decided that she would try, recover, and help Maria in any way she could. But time passed and it did not get better. The cough that used to choke her was much less now. "And we have guests." Maria came to a woman's room. "Who?" The woman tensed up. More than anything else in the world, she was afraid of the arrival of her mother, that when she saw, she would not listen to anyone, just take her home. And Lucy could not afford that. "Allow me to introduce Nani." A man entered the room. He had gray hair, but he didn't look old. Jacket, pants, boots, and most of all, Lucy noticed the perfume. She knew it wasn't cheap. "Hello," she said quietly, trying to cover her face. "You know, Lucy, as much as I've heard about you, it seems like I know you personally." He walked over and shook her hand. Why this officiousness? Just Lucy. She felt the redness coming to her face. "Okay then, I'm Nanny." He looked at her. Rays of wrinkles diverged from his eyes, but that only adorned the man. They talked some more and then Maria invited them to the table. Lucy didn't want to go, but Nanny insisted. He helped her up. The woman threw on a robe. "I'm sorry I'm like this." Lucy imagined herself, her hair tousled with grain, herself in some kind of robe. "What are you talking about? You're sick. We'll sit at the table, and then we'll get you back to bed." He walked very quietly and supported her. Maria did her best. There was nothing on the table. Everyone sat down at the table and talked a lot, including the treatment. "I can't agree to this." She looked at Nanny. At that moment, she felt that he was not looking at her as a weak and sick woman. "Okay, I'll lend you the money after I can. You pay it back in installments." He tilted his head to the side, waiting for her answer. "Are you sure it will help me?" Her head was involuntarily tilted this way. "I'm 200% sure." He raised his wine glass at something else and drank. "I guess I'll be going." Lucy started to get up. "No, we're going for a little walk now." Nanny stood up and gave the lady a hand. "But me," she pointed to her robe again. "That's okay. Here's the coat." He pulled out of the closet. "We won't be long." They went outside, stood there for a while, both of them being silent. It was a pleasure to chat. He walked her to her room. "We didn't even talk." She smiled her crooked smile. "You know, sometimes even being quiet with someone is good." He took her hand, kissed it, and left. Lucy sat on the bed, looking at the closed door. That's why, when she had become so helpless and ugly, she had met a decent man. Not wanting to think about it, she picked up a book and started reading to ward off the bad thoughts. Maria saw Lucy off to the clinic, which her father had paid for. Elizabeth volunteered to accompany her, to be there for her if needed. "You don't realize what an amazing man he is," Lucy told her on the road. "You know, the fact that he gave money for treatment, yes, but you have to look at him." Again criticized another man, Lucy. "You can always tell at first sight," squinted her friend. "Yes, but this one doesn't seem to have any flaws." Elizabeth couldn't believe herself when she said that. They arrived at the clinic. There the women were placed in a room. Elizabeth had an extra place. The treatment began. Lucy underwent 3 surgeries in total. The doctors tried to relax her muscles. Whether it worked or not, it will be seen when the rehabilitation course is over. "Elizabeth, help," Lucy asked. It was not easy for her. Her face was in bandages. She couldn't even drink properly. "Now call right away. That's what I came here for." She jumped up from her seat. "You know, I thought I'd call my mother," Lucy said one night. "Don't you think it would be a shock to her? She's not a girl anymore." Elizabeth was worried about Betty. "I don't know, but for some reason I feel like doing it now." Lucy wanted to cry, but the doctor said she should do it less often. "Well, let's wait a couple more days, or in general, discharged and go straight to her," offered options Elizabeth. "Soon, you'll find out. Just wait a bit." He drove on. The car stopped outside the restaurant. The man got out, opened the door on Lucy's side, helped her out. Mickey and Maria were waiting for them on the porch. "Daddy," the girl wanted to say something, but the man put his finger to his lips. "Why are you all like this?" Lucy looked at Mickey, who seemed as confused as she was. They walked to the lounge and sat down at a table. "Lucy, when Maria started telling me about you, you reminded me of a woman. I couldn't believe it until I saw you." He put a photograph on the table. Lucy took it. There was a young woman who looked just like her. She was wearing the same blue dress at the time it was taken, and her hair was the same. "I mean, you turned me into her." It was a little uncomfortable. "No, it was just love at first word. Not even a look." Tears appeared in Nanny's eyes again. "I like you too." The woman told the truth. "Then let's drink to that." They'd all raised their glasses, except Maria. "What are you doing?" Her father looked at her. "I can't." She looked at her husband. "What? I'm going to be a grandfather?" Nanny was happy. "Yes," she looked at Lucy. "And you, a grandmother, if you agree." Of course I would agree. The atmosphere was very familial. They had a wonderful evening. After that, they got into their cars and drove home. When they stopped at one of the intersections, Lucy noticed a familiar silhouette in the car next to her. It was Jacob, and as soon as he felt someone looking at him, he turned around. The woman smiled. She could see the man's face start to turn white when he saw her in the nice car, next to the imposing man beside her. "Will you marry me?" Nanny asked her at that moment. "Yes," she smiled. She had finally found the happiness she had been searching for all of her life. "Okay, as always, your take." Smiling was also contraindicated for now. Lucy studied hard. She didn't want Nanny's money to go to waste. She did everything the doctor said. Finally, it was time to remove the bandages. Lucy looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it. Yes, her head was slightly tilted to the side, but now only she noticed it, and most importantly, she could control it. But the distortion of facial expressions wasn't what it used to be, especially since the surgeon had said that as she practiced daily, it would go away completely. I can't believe it. She looked at her friend. And he did it. Everyone wanted only to cripple you, but he cured you. Elizabeth raised a finger up. It was necessary to stay here a little longer. Elizabeth was told that Lucy no longer needed an escort. She had to go home. What a pity that you and I are not back together, the friends hugged. Come, let's go to mine, reminded Lucy of her friend's promise. I will. She kissed her on the cheek and left. Lucy had time to think. After all the treatments and everything else, she would lie on the bed or sit by the window and look out there. There were only good thoughts in her head. She thought that even as she left Mickey and Maria, she would never forget them. When the girl gives birth, she could stay with her grandchildren. The door opened a little. Yes, Lucy wondered. No one had come to see her at this time already. She looked around, saw Nanny. Madama, he spread his arms to embrace the woman. I think you're flattering me a little. She stood up and walked towards him. No, I never lied to anyone, nor do I say flattering words. The man hugged Lucy, and then they sat down right there in the ward. I'm glad of that fact. She looked at him. He was handsome. Lucy began to imagine what he must have been like when he was younger. He must have had a lot of girls. Listen, you're being discharged in a couple of days. I want to pick you up myself and surprise you. He didn't say what. Okay. She didn't understand why she needed permission for that. Promise that I'll do everything the way I want, and if you don't like it, you'll fix it, he said, and then didn't look her in the eye. For what you've already done to me, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. She pointed at her face. Deal. Then he took her hand as he always did, kissed it, and left the room. It was nice to be cared for by someone other than yourself. Lucy waited to be discharged, and it came, just like Nanny had said. 2 days later. Hey, he was alone. I thought Maria would be with you. The woman was surprised. Let's go. Remember, I promised you a surprise, the man reminded her. Yes, I'm very curious what it will be. She got into the car. First in line was the beauty parlor. Why? She turned to him. She realized she didn't look good, but she could do it herself, but later. Quietly, he put a finger to his lips. You promised. Lucy went. Nanny waited patiently in the car. Her hair was colored, styled. The woman Nines looked immediately younger. After that, a little makeup. She walked to the car. She felt like she had been transformed into a queen. Beautiful. Nanny couldn't help but compliment her. Where to now? She turned to him. To the store, the man said confidently. You're so crazy. She shook her head. You'll understand everything later. He spoke in riddles. Several dresses were already ready to be tried on when Lucy went in there. She wore them all. They were all gorgeous. But she chose one, the blue one. She liked that color so much. As she walked to the car, Nanny almost cried. What's going on with you? She couldn't understand.